Chapter 449. The old man exploded, leaving behind a pile of ashes on the spot. A mass of glaring solar essence fire dispersed. The terrifying temperature just now made one's heart palpitate. Even now, the air was unbearably hot with rolling heat waves. Chu Feng waved his hand and used his spiritual energy to retrieve the diamond chakram. It was snow-white and lustrous with a soft luster. It looked like a magnificent work of art. The area was very quiet. Everyone was stunned. An evolver of the carefree realm had died, just like that. He had been burned to ashes with just one blow. It could be said that both his body and soul had been destroyed. Chun Sheng's face was deathly pale, without a trace of blood. He clenched his fists and loosened them. His body was slightly convulsing, but it was unknown whether it was from anger or fear. You? He stared at Chu Feng with a face full of resentment. His body trembled slightly with hatred and anger. At the same time, he felt his hair stand on end. He was somewhat afraid. Those who had come from Penglai Island had always been conceited and considered themselves orthodox. How could he endure this now? The old man beside him had been killed in public, just like that. His face turned pale and then ashen. This was a great humiliation for him. "Brother Chu, what's going on?" Li Qing asked. He was dressed in ancient attire with a wooden hairpin in his hair bun. He was somewhat different from many people dressed in modern formal attire. He put down his goblet and walked over with a somewhat cold expression. They had agreed to stop fighting and avoid bloodshed, but now someone had died. As soon as he moved, a few more people approached. One of them was a woman in green. Her sleeves fluttered in the wind. She was also dressed in ancient attire. Her skin was very good like fine jade, and she had all kinds of hair ornaments in her hair. "Saintess Lin, what do you think?" Li Qing asked her. This was actually a saintess? Chu Feng was astonished. Li Lin's appearance was outstanding and her temperament was outstanding. She was very calm, and a divine light flashed through her eyes. She was now also looking over with a cold expression. "Saintess Li Qing, Saintess Li Lin." Chu Feng looked at them. These two were the most powerful and had the highest status in this group. Chu Feng was neither fast nor slow as he calmly said, "That old man wanted to kill me and humiliate my character. I had no choice but to defend myself properly." Nearby, many people were speechless. This was the first time that someone could say something like legitimate defense and turn someone's defense into ashes. Chun Sheng's expression was gloomy as he launched an attack here. "You murderer, deranged and deranged. You killed the people of my Penglai immortal island in front of everyone. Just how arrogant and conceited are you? Do you think you can act like this just because you are heaven's chosen? Too vile and domineering." No matter what, he had to put a big hat on Chu Feng first. Even if it was his malicious provocation that led to this result, and he had indeed asked the old man to kill Chu Feng, he must not admit it. Chu Feng revealed an odd expression as he glanced at Chun Sheng. Then he walked over and, without saying a word, slapped him across the face with a loud smack. Chun Sheng screamed. His face was completely unbearable. He simply couldn't believe it. That person was even more tyrannical than what he said when he was slandering him. Everyone was speechless. Was this person really that arrogant? "Chu Feng, what are you doing?" Li Qing shouted. Li Lin's expression was also displeased. She revealed a cold temperament. A divine light blossomed from her eyes as she stared at Chu Feng. There were also a few people beside them, both men and women. Their bodies overflowed with strands of energy. It was very dense and of very high quality, which could prove their strength. In addition, there were 10 or 20 outer realm beings of the carefree realm who were slowly strolling over from a distance. "I'm reasoning with him," Chu Feng said. Then he looked at Chun Sheng, who had been sent flying by his slap, and stood up from the grass. He looked down from above and said, "Young master of the Chun clan of Penglai, right? Did I reason well?" "You are going too far." Chun Sheng was furious. This was humiliating him in front of everyone. What reasoning was there to talk about with a slap? He was the young master of a certain branch of Penglai, one of the group of people with the highest status among the native evolvers. He was proud of his noble bloodline, but now he was being treated like this. "Saint Child Li Qing, Saintess Li Lin, please uphold justice. This person is arrogant and despotic, repeatedly acting violently. Please take him down. Chun Sheng was shocked and angry, but he still didn't go crazy. He still wanted to borrow power and suppress Chu Feng through the outer realm beings. Bang! The next moment, he was sent flying again, coughing up large mouthfuls of blood. His face was full of shock, and he was about to explode from anger. That was because the one who attacked was still Chu Feng. He kicked him in the chest, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard as he was sent flying. F***%. At this moment, Chun Sheng exploded. He couldn't bear it any longer and cursed. He had never suffered such a great loss before and was humiliated in front of everyone. You finally stopped pretending? Chu Feng stared at him calmly and added, I'm still reasoning with you. Then, he didn't wait for the others to question or make things difficult for him and directly berated Chun Sheng. Do you think that by casually stirring up trouble and showing off your tongue, you can turn black into white and the dead into the living? Just now, you provoked me maliciously and wanted that old man to kill me. That old thing even took an iron chain used to tie up livestock and wanted to put it on me, humiliating and targeting me like this. He wanted me to resist so that he could kill me. Your actions are righteous and reasonable when it comes out of your mouth. You feel a great sense of accomplishment, don't you? At this point, Chu Feng paused for a moment and then said, so you spit everywhere and talk about your reasons while I fight with my fists and feet and talk about my reasons. You. Chun Sheng's face was gloomy and almost distorted as he pointed at Chu Feng. With a bang, Chu Feng raised his leg again and kicked out. As a result, with a crack, Chun Sheng's finger was fractured. He screamed miserably, and his arm trembled as he staggered away. You pointed at me and humiliated me like this. I can only reason with you, Chu Feng said. Enough, Chu Feng. Aren't you being too arrogant? This time, before Li Qing and Li Lin could speak, a red-haired man who was more than 3 meters tall berated them. He was very powerful, and beams of light flew out of his eyes like searchlights. At this moment, he was sharp and threatening. Actually, I don't want to say anything more. It's too boring. Many of you have evolved to the carefree realm, and your divine senses are sharp. You should have sensed what happened just now. If it really doesn't work, there are cameras and monitors over there. Go and see what's going on. Chu Feng sputtered and was fairly direct. He didn't want to say anything else after that. The group of people was dumbfounded. Could it be like this? He even brought up surveillance. The people here were all evolvers. Did they really think that they had to watch surveillance after being caught in a brawl? I still think you're arrogant. The red-haired man was tall and had an imposing manner. He approached and looked down on Chu Feng. Chu Feng was very calm and said, What's your name? Which galaxy are you from? I don't know you, right? Don't be like Chun Sheng and like to put labels on others. This isn't a good habit. The local evolvers in the surroundings were all astonished. They felt that Chu Feng was truly fearless and too casual. He didn't even bat an eyelid in the face of an outer realm creature of the carefree realm and even questioned and warned him. Many people had seen that not long ago, this intimidating red-haired man had chatted happily with Chun Sheng and the old man. Chun Sheng had invited them to Penglai Immortal Island as guests. At this moment, the red-haired man heard Chu Feng's words and smiled coldly. Your temper isn't small. Remember, my name is Zhu Qingquan. Zhu Qingquan, what are you doing? St. Child Li Qing looked at him because he had discovered that Zhu Qingquan was about to attack. Zhu Qingquan smiled and said, Nothing much. I see that the heaven's chosen one is extraordinary and has a fierce personality. He's very much to my liking, and I want to give him a hand. Stop, don't attack. Someone beside St. Child Li Qing also spoke up in an attempt to stop Zhu Qingquan. Oh, it's just giving him a hand. It's not like we're going to fight to the death. It's not a big deal. We all want to see the elegance of the Earth's heaven's chosen one, someone beside him said from Zhu Qingquan's point of view. It was a man with a crocodile's tail and a wide mouth full of fangs. He was practically like a human-shaped crocodile with a cold and sinister gaze. This was a creature from the Crocodragon star. At the same time, There were a few others who chimed in and expressed that they wanted to see Chu Feng's methods. Li Qing and Li Lin looked at each other. They knew that even though they had reached a consensus earlier that they couldn't target Chu Feng at this stage, there were still some people who were unconvinced and harbored hostility. They wanted nothing more than to immediately cut off his head and exchange it for the Saint Bronze seal. Now, it was obvious that they wanted to cause trouble. The smile on Zhu Qingquan's face was very strong, and he no longer looked so cold. He was very tall and approached in a few large steps to size up Chu Feng. Even without Chun Sheng, he would still find trouble with Chu Feng. Moreover, he now had a ready-made excuse. That was because he had come from a star passage of Mount Zhongnan. He was Zhu Wu's trusted aide and had received orders to slaughter the native heaven's chosen one, Chu Feng. Who was Zhu Wu? He was a descendant that the Nine-Eared Sparrow liked very much. He had the style of the quasi-sage from back then, and his temperament was cold and cruel. Most importantly, the Nine-Eared Sparrow had borrowed the power of the quasi-sage golden wolf to manifest his divinity. He had contacted his descendant Zhu Wu and ordered him to kill Chu Feng. Therefore, Zhu Qingquan wanted to cause trouble even if he didn't have an excuse. His heart was filled with killing intent, and he wanted to kill Chu Feng. He was a member of the Nine-Eared Sparrow's bloodline. Some of the Outer Realm carefree beings supported Zhu Qingquan in weighing up Chu Feng. This naturally made Li Qing frown. He was also somewhat hesitant because their opinions weren't united. At this time, the native evolvers all looked at Chu Feng. What would Chu Feng do at such a tense and critical moment? Qi Honglin of the Pre-Qin Research Institute opened his mouth and whispered, "Brother Chu Feng, let's take a step back." Jiang Luotian also frowned and said telepathically, "You'll suffer greatly if you fight them head-on like this." The young Xingyi Grandmaster Su Qing, Princess Lin of the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave, and a large group of people who knew Chu Feng also glanced over. Some transmitted their voices while others revealed odd expressions. As they saw it, Chu Feng would most likely be in big trouble if he continued to act so head-on. Chu Feng laughed but didn't say anything. Since he dared to come to Mount Putuo, he couldn't shrink back. He wouldn't have come if he was afraid. As Chu Feng saw it, these people wouldn't let him shrink back just because he wanted to. They had long since set their eyes on him. In the end, it all depended on one's true strength. It sounded nice to say that they wanted to stop fighting and avoid bloodshed, but Chu Feng believed that some of these people were eager to cut off his head. If he knew that these people were from the Nine-Eared Sparrow's lineage and were specifically targeting him, Chu Feng wouldn't need to think so much and would immediately start a fight. But now, he didn't waste too much time and said, "Then let's attack. Oh, it's just a helping hand. How can I fight to the death with Brother Chu?" Zhu Qingquan laughed, but there were cold tears in the depths of his eyes. He had come here to kill. His powerful body was suffused with a terrifying mist and flames as he closed in on Chu Feng. He wasn't too worried that Chu Feng would activate Mount Putuo's domains. That was because the purple bamboo forest had long since been cleaned up by the Outer Realm entities. Bang, 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 bang. Soil and rocks flew everywhere. Since Chu Feng had made his choice, he naturally wouldn't be lenient. In the blink of an eye, he tossed out the 4 bronze pillars and sealed off the area. The 4 dragon-locking pillars had even surrounded him, to say nothing of Zhu Qingquan. He was immediately enveloped in a dense mist. Zhu Qingquan was somewhat angry. He quickly took action and pounced toward Chu Feng's position. He felt that he would definitely be able to hit the target in one strike. However, everything changed after the 4 dragon-locking pillars were inserted into the ground. His palm struck empty air. This wasn't the ghostly labyrinth of the past. After many refinements by the revered 8 trigrams furnace, 2 layers of mysteries had been uncovered. At present, they were much stronger than before and were most suitable for trapping people. As a domain researcher, Chu Feng wouldn't cause any trouble for him even though he was standing within. He was proficient in the domain runes here, and at the same time, he possessed the fiery eyes and could see through everything. How could he possibly be trapped in the upgraded version of the ghostly labyrinth? A dark red spear appeared in Chu Feng's hand. This was something he had snatched from the 100 Transformations Saint Child Yuanfeng's troops. Back then, he had seized several secret treasures and obtained quite a bountiful harvest. Bang! He used the dark red spear as a large stick and swung it directly at Zhu Qingquan's face, causing his flesh to become badly mangled and his face to spasm. Even an evolver of the carefree realm wouldn't be able to endure the pain after suddenly being struck in the face with a large metal stick. Bang! The next moment he was struck in the head once again. The blow caused his body to stagger and his skull to feel like it was about to crack. He almost fell head first onto the ground. A carefree realm entity can really take a beating. Chu Feng sighed in admiration. He wasn't affected in the slightest by the domain displayed by the dragon-locking pillars. He could move freely, and his eyes could see everything clearly. "You dare!" Zhu Qingquan was furious. He had been struck twice in the face and skull. This was truly a humiliation. Bang! The next moment, the ice-cold tip of the spear stabbed over and almost entered his mouth. This caused his hair to stand on end. This domain was simply too strange. His divine instincts had disappeared, and he didn't even know that danger was approaching. "Ah!" He cried out loudly and rapidly retreated. Bang! Chu Feng swung the spear once again and struck the back of his head with astonishing strength. This time, a slight cracking sound was heard, and a crack appeared on the back of his skull. In the outside world, the group of people was dumbfounded and felt a chill run through their bodies. Chapter 450. Bang! The dark red spear was being used as a large stick by Chu Feng. When it was swung once more, it streaked across the sky at high speed, causing the air to explode. It struck the back of Zhu Qingquan's neck and sent him flying. The pain was unbearable, and the sound of bones fracturing could be heard from his neck. Zhu Qingquan's vision darkened, and he almost fainted. He fell onto the grassland, causing the soil to churn and form a large pit. He felt his hair stand on end. He had no power to retaliate after falling into this domain, so much so that he couldn't even see his opponent and was being suppressed. This made him both furious and terrified. Zhu Qingquan determined a direction and ran madly, hoping to charge out in one go. That was because he had seen that the 4 pillars Chu Feng had tossed out didn't cover a large area. The domain's range was limited. His movements, in the eyes of outsiders, appeared to be running in circles and drawing circles in a very orderly manner. This was an upgraded version of the ghostly labyrinth. It obscured Zhu Qingquan's divine instincts and made him think that he could charge out. While everyone was astonished, they also felt a chill. Chu Feng, an evolver of the shackled realm, was actually able to force a carefree realm expert into such a miserable state. Chu Feng took a few steps forward unhurriedly and arrived in front of that orderly circular path. He waited there and slowly swung the dark red spear. Zhu Qingquan ran madly all the way, breaking through the sound barrier. It seemed to everyone that he was charging toward the dark red metal stick himself. With a bang, his face came into contact with the metal stick and was immediately distorted. His entire body flipped over and fell down, screaming miserably in midair. It was too painful. He felt as though he had been kicked in the face by the hoof of an ancient demonic donkey. It was almost rotten. Zhu Qingquan's heart was boiling with killing intent, but there was nothing he could do. He was the descendant of the Nine Sparrow and had walked out of the Star Passage under the orders of the Saint Sun Zhu Wuk to kill Chu Feng. In the end, he couldn't even touch a hair on that person's body. Is it because the carefree realm is too resistant to beatings, or is his face too thick? He can even crawl up like this. It seems I need to put in more effort, Chu Feng muttered to himself. When these words entered the ears of others, their expressions became complicated. An evolver at the shackled realm was dealing with a carefree realm expert, yet he was still so dissatisfied. Zhu Qingquan swore in his heart that once he escaped, he would definitely find an opportunity to tear Chu Feng into 2 halves. He would make him pay back 10 times the pain he had just suffered. At this moment, his entire body was emitting black mist, accompanied by flames. His entire being was enraged to the extreme. At the same time, he was also afraid, somewhat afraid, because he remembered that Chu Feng still had a snow-white bracelet in his hand that could release the solar essence flame. If he were to attack now, he would die without a doubt. Without the domain, he was confident that he could easily evade the diamond chakram. He had already made preparations before attacking. Zhu Chenkuan believed that the death of the old man from Penglai was purely self-inflicted. As an evolver of the carefree realm, he would not have been ambushed if he had been a little more cautious. But now, it was his turn to face it. When a mysterious domain appeared and enveloped him, he was thoroughly frightened. Previously, he was confident that he could dodge it, but now, he definitely could not. The other Outer Realm descenders also noticed this problem. The solar essence flame within the snow-white bracelet combined with the domain was simply a fatal blow. It was somewhat difficult to neutralize. Zhu Qingkuan clenched his teeth and was prepared to admit defeat. Even though his heart was burning with killing intent, he had no choice but to lower his head. As long as he could leave the domain's range, there would be plenty of opportunities to kill this native. However, Chu Feng increased his strength and began to attack violently. Stick after stick came smashing down on his head and face, beating him until he couldn't even speak. He spat out a mouthful of blood. This time, the stick strike on his face had shaken off all his teeth and sent them flying out together with blood. He could no longer speak. Crack! Following which, his right arm was fractured into 3 pieces. Ah! He cried out miserably as his left kneecap was smashed into 4 pieces. He immediately knelt down. Stop! He roared loudly. He was extremely sullen. However, what greeted him was yet another stick strike. This time, his left shoulder blade was smashed and all 4 of his limbs were fractured. I admit defeat. It's just a spar. Stop! He cried out loudly and immediately lowered his head in defeat. He simply couldn't hold on any longer. The sound of bones cracking rang out once again. His spine was broken and he was sent flying. He couldn't get up for a while. Stop! At this time, Li Qing, Li Lin, and the others spoke loudly to stop him. If this went on, Zhu Chenkuan would definitely die inside. Chu Feng waved his hand and whistled through the wind, sending Zhu Chenkuan out of the domain where the 4 pillars were. The expert with a crocodile's tail and a human body immediately launched an attack. His name was Ahai, and he came from the crocodile dragon star, which wasn't far from the Een Sparrow's ancestral star. Chu Feng, do you think you're unrivaled under the heavens? You're too tyrannical. Ahai rebuked. He was like a human-shaped crocodile with a head of green hair and a wide mouth full of fangs. He sneered and said, he's only lending a hand, yet you want to take his life. You don't put us in your eyes at all. Do you want to start a war? Chu Feng was very calm and said, I've never been lenient when facing people who have killing intent toward me. Don't you want to enter the domain and reason with me? Reason with him? Fists and feet or spears? Many people revealed astonished expressions. This person was truly unyielding. He wasn't afraid at all when facing a carefree realm expert from the outer realms. He was simply too casual and natural. Ahai went over and helped Zhu Qingkuan up. He turned back and sneered, but for the time being, he didn't fight back. Chu Feng naturally looked forward. Were it not for the fact that he didn't want to completely fall out with this group of carefree realm beings from the outer realms, he would have slaughtered Zhu Qingkuan just now. After all, the Saint Child Li Qing had always said he wanted to stop fighting. Chu Feng also didn't want to shed all pretense of cordiality on the spot. He wanted to return the favor and give them face. At this time, many familiar faces wore complicated expressions and were deeply shaken. Jiang Luoshun, Qi Honglin, and the others were all speechless. Chu Feng's performance just now was too shocking. Although they had long since heard that he dared to challenge a saint child on Mount Lu and annihilate his troops, they were even more shocked after witnessing it with their own eyes. The other native evolvers, as well as Princess Lin and the others from the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave, were also overwhelmed with emotions. Even Li Qing and Li Lin didn't dare underestimate Chu Feng. He had raised his danger level and cleared out the entire area, yet the other party was still able to lay down a domain. Suddenly, Chu Feng raised his head. In truth, the others also felt it and looked toward the coast. At some point, the young master of the Penglai Island Chun family, Chun Sheng, had run to the seaside. At this moment, he was rushing over from a large multicolored ship with two old men. They passed through the purple bamboo forest and arrived in the blink of an eye, stirring up violent gales. The two old men's expressions were as gloomy as water as they stared at Chu Feng. They had received news that one of their old brothers had been ambushed and burned to ashes by Chu Feng. Their hearts were surging with killing intent. However, they restrained themselves quite well. The purple-robed old man was called Chun Pu. He forcefully suppressed the killing intent and flames of anger in his heart and said calmly, "Chu Feng, we're all native evolvers. How could you attack us? We came here today to see you, the heavens chosen, first. Who would have thought you would be so ruthless and kill at the slightest disagreement? How are you different from a fiendish demon? You've truly disappointed us. At first, we wanted to bring you to Penglai and let you receive some important inheritances from Earth. Sigh, we viewed you as the heavens chosen, yet you wantonly trampled on our dignity and killed my old brother's life. How painful!" He sighed as he wrung his hands with a pained expression. Chu Feng glanced at the purple-robed old man Chun Pu and then at Chun Sheng. "Is this the reinforcement you invited to reason with me? Let's go into the domain and talk." Chun Sheng's face alternated between green and white. He was allergic to the word reason and wanted nothing more than to skin Chu Feng alive. The other old man, Chun Feng, said, "How heartbreaking. A heavens chosen like you has disappointed us and acted so unscrupulously. Not only did you start a war with our fellow Dao friends from the outer realm, you even want to make an enemy out of the natives? Sigh, Chu Feng, you made our hearts ache. At first, we had such high hopes for you." He shook his head with a regretful expression. In the end, he sighed and said, "Although we're pained and disappointed, we still want to give you a chance to change. After all, you're still young. Allow a young person to make a mistake. Who hasn't been young and frivolous before? Come with us to Penglai and reflect on your actions for a period of time." He had the appearance of a benevolent elder and revealed a pained expression. Although Chu Feng didn't want to talk too much with them, he wouldn't allow them to distort the truth and accuse him of something. That was because people would follow blindly. If he really allowed Penglai to spread the news, there might really be people who would believe him and become completely unfathomable. His expression was cold as he said, "To outsiders, you guys are soft-footed shrimps and don't dare to be firm. However, you guys have a natural sense of superiority toward the native evolvers. You consider yourselves the orthodox lineage and view us as your servants. A servant dares to travel alone and drive a unicorn carriage to summon me. If I don't obey, I'll be suppressed by you guys. It's always been you guys who want to kill me, but now you're putting on an act and acting like you're bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind. You obviously hate me to death, but you still have to grieve and act as if you want to save me from disaster. Could it be that everyone in Penglai that considers itself the orthodox lineage is so hypocritical? I'd rather see a true villain." Chun Pu sighed and said, "Young people are always so impulsive. It's not good to have a violent temper. We sincerely hope that you can repent and know that you've made a great mistake. Just change. Let's go. Follow us to Penglai." A wisp of green appeared on Chu Feng's face. He felt that these two old fellows were too shameless and excessively hypocritical. They wanted to take him to Penglai because they wanted to dig out the secrets he was hiding. Once they squeezed him dry, he would die without a burial. It's rare to see people as shameless as you. Don't you feel ashamed? Chu Feng's face was full of ridicule. He then looked back at Chun Sheng and said, "Are these your two grandfathers or old servants? Go and check the surveillance of this place for them and make them shut up. You're courting death." Chun Sheng hated Chu Feng to the core. He turned to the two old men and requested, "You must capture him. After interrogating him, I'll personally grind his bones and scatter his ashes. You've finally torn off your cover and flew into a rage out of humiliation? Come, if you want to kill me, then do it. I'll tell you the truth. I plan to kill all of you today." As Chu Feng spoke, his words became tyrannical. He didn't conceal his determination to kill them at all. "You arrogant brat!" Chen Feng couldn't bear it any longer. His expression became incomparably gloomy as he pointed at Chu Feng. Chun Pu's expression was also cold and indifferent. He said in a lecturing tone, "It's a good thing for a young man to be impulsive, but too much is easy to break. Do you think you can do whatever you want and be unrivaled under the heavens just because your domain attainments are extraordinary? You have to know that there are many things in this world you don't understand. There are many things and people you need to revere. Since you refuse to come to your senses, this old man will capture you today. I'll let you see how high the sky is, how deep the earth is, and how shallow and ignorant you are." Chu Feng asked calmly, "Didn't your mother tell you when you were young? You're so disgustingly hypocritical that she even vomited when she gave birth to you. Brat, you dare humiliate me." Chen Pu was furious. He also couldn't stand it anymore. His killing intent soared and pervaded the air. He could no longer conceal it. "You've finally torn off your cover," mocked Chu Feng. In the surroundings, be it the native evolvers or the beings from the outer realms, they were all speechless when they looked at Chu Feng. But at this moment, they were all terrified. All of them retreated because they knew a great battle was about to break out. Chen Pu and Chun Feng each shot out a small flag and stuck it into the ground. This immediately calmed down the domain fluctuations in the area. Domains are nothing. Young people are just too impulsive and lack reverence. It's easy for them to stumble. Chen Feng laughed indifferently. Chen Pu also followed up in order to capture Chu Feng, but they weren't in a hurry to attack. At this time, the heavily wounded Zhu Qingquan sensed the changes in the area. His eyes immediately shot out an astonishing beam of light. He had already recovered most of his energy after consuming the medicine and was also connecting his broken bones. "Count me in. Let me kill him," he said coldly. He hated Chu Feng to the core. Without the domains, he was confident he could crush this native to death with one hand. At this time, he transformed into his true form. His entire body was black and red like a vermilion bird. He was surrounded by raging flames as he hovered in the air. Chu Feng stared at him. The more he looked at him, the more he felt he was like the blood-red bird that had been hovering outside the earth. He had already suspected it when he used the fiery eyes earlier on. However, Zhu Qingquan's entire body was black and red. He had more of the Een Sparrow bloodline than the Nine Sparrow and was transforming into a vermilion bird. "What's your relationship with that fat bird outside the earth a few days ago?" Chu Feng asked. "My ancestor, the Nine Sparrow," Zhu Qingquan replied, but his expression was unsightly. "What fat?" That was clearly majestic and intimidating. Its body was half the size of the earth. He was full of arrogance. Back then, the Nine Sparrow had conquered this planet and killed countless rebels. Later on, the women and children of the natives would tremble at the sight of the Nine Sparrow. He and Zhu Wuk had stepped onto the star passage together. They had followed the Nine Sparrow's footsteps and walked the same path. They had killed their way out of Mount Zhongnan and wanted to kill the rebels on this planet. He wanted to replicate the glory of his ancestor and rise up here. Chu Feng said coldly, "Descendant of the bloodiest and cruelest of the heavenly knights, don't even think of leaving here alive today. You're dead for sure. Ha, you rebel, hand over your life." Zhu Qingquan's murderous intent surged, and his cold laughter was ear-piercing. Ha! A hive from the Crocodrogon planet also laughed after hearing these words. "The heavens chosen of the natives, you're truly insolent. I'll count you in too. Get over here." Chu Feng glanced at him. At this time, some of the carefree realm experts from the outer realms revealed their killing intent. Although they didn't move, they narrowed their eyes and emitted a biting cold air. That was because some of these people were the descendants of heavenly knights. There were also some who purely wanted to remove Chu Feng's head and exchange it for the Saint Bronze seal. However, because they had reached a temporary consensus earlier, they had been restraining themselves and couldn't make a move. Chu Feng swept his gaze over the people from Penglai and then looked at Zhu Qingquan, Ahai, and the other experts from the outer realms. He was extremely calm and said, "Those who want to make a move, feel free to come forward. I'll kill one if one comes and kill two if two come. I don't mind starting a massacre here. No matter who they are, I'll wash them all with blood if they dare to set foot here." Chapter 451. "Brat, don't be arrogant," the elder from Penglai, Chun Pu, rebuked. "Huh." Zhu Chunkuan laughed heartily and transformed into a black-red vicious bird. Surrounded by black mist and flowing with flames, he stared fixedly at Chu Feng. "Cut off your own path of survival." Yihai's thick azure hair draped over his shoulders as he spoke in a cold voice. Chu Feng's words just now were directed at all of them. He was going to fight a group of enemies alone. This caused them to reveal cold smiles as if they were looking at a dead man. In the distance, the surface of the sea was like a giant sapphire, boundless and tranquil. Nearby, a large patch of green grass in the purple bamboo forest was filled with murderous intent. A bloody conflict was about to unfold. Chu Feng stood there alone in the face of many powerful, carefree realm enemies. He put away his dark red spear and replaced it with a bronze sword. He was extremely calm. "Dao friend wants to kill him? Please." Chun Pu spoke. He looked at Zhu Qingkuan in his true form and politely invited him to make the first move. Zhu Qingkuan flapped his wings and flames surged. This kind of rebel naturally can't live much longer. However, he humiliated your Penglai too much. It's better if you guys go first. In a while, you can share half of his body with me to eat. Is this all right? Dao friend, are you sure you don't want to slash at him first and let him understand his shallow ignorance? Chun Pu asked. "No need, you first," Zhu Qingkuan said. The two actually modestly declined in front of everyone, their words unbridled. Chun Pu was sincerely expressing goodwill towards Zhu Qingkuan. Just as Chu Feng had said, they were unyielding internally and considered themselves orthodox, but they were weak externally and didn't hesitate to curry favor. Zhu Qingkuan wanted to kill Chu Feng, but he didn't want to risk his life. He had suffered a great loss not long ago and only wanted to occupy the most advantageous position to land a killing blow at the critical moment. Chu Feng's head was too valuable. Whoever could kill him could exchange it for the Saint Bronze Seal. The two had different thoughts and laughed at the same time. They appeared to be mutually courteous and didn't place Chu Feng in their eyes at all. Behind them, Yihai's eyes were cold. Although he was domineering, he wouldn't go all out. He chose an advantageous position and wanted to cut off Chu Feng's head at the last moment. Finally, the people of Penglai moved. The two elders, Chun Pu and Chun Feng, walked forward together. "You think you're very strong? In fact, it's ridiculous." Chun Pu looked at Chu Feng and calmly said, "When you think you can soar through the sky like an eagle, you're actually just climbing from a jar to a bigger well. Come, let this old man wake you up and see how small the jar you are in is." This old man had a sharp tongue, mocking Chu Feng as a toad in a jar. Before the great battle, Chu Feng became increasingly calm. He said, "Flaunting your seniority and believing yourself infallible. When you see your own head flying, you will feel ashamed of your current words. There's no point in talking anymore. Take him down." Chun Feng made his move. He pounced forward like a bolt of lightning. He was an evolver of the carefree realm. If he really got close to Chu Feng, he would naturally be able to kill him. Chu Feng retreated explosively and entered the domain formed by the 4 bronze pillars. "You still want to use the domain? It's too late." At this time, Chun Pu also moved. He quickly rushed into the area and wasn't afraid of the domain's ambush. During this process, the 2 small flags stuck in the ground were like 2 earth dragons. They tore through the grass and followed them into the domain. In an instant, the area became silent as expected. The domain had lost its effect and couldn't trap them. Domain breaking flag. St. Child Li Qing recognized the origin of the 2 small flags. Those who weren't domain experts couldn't refine them. They were specially made for the purpose of disintegrating domains. Generally speaking, domain researchers wouldn't easily refine them or give them away because it would damage their domain. Little friend Chu Feng, why do you need to run? Where did your confidence go? Chen Pu laughed lightly. Chi. The next moment, the escaping Chu Feng stopped in his tracks. There was a dense mass of magnetic stones around him. There were hundreds and thousands of them, interweaving with each other to form a dazzling pattern. This was something he had prepared meticulously recently. He wanted to lay down a large domain in a suitable place to trap and kill his enemies. But now, he had no choice but to use a portion of it in advance. That was because he hadn't expected the two Penglai elders to have domain-breaking flags on them. Those things were quite rare. Chen Feng was startled and halted his steps. Beneath his feet, that palm-sized triangular flag was flickering with black light. The flag's surface wasn't made of cloth, but rather, it was made of the same material as the flagpole. This was an extremely rare and precious material. Just a small piece of it was enough to cause a sudden change in the magnetic field of an area and interfere with various energy arrangements and combinations. At this moment, the domain-breaking flag was glowing. It wasn't as smooth to break through the ground anymore. Everything had a limit. When the domain was powerful enough, the domain-breaking flag would lose its effectiveness. Chu Feng shot out thousands of magnetic stones from the spatial bottle in one go and laid down a domain. Naturally, the small flag's effectiveness was reduced sharply. Although Chen Pu and Chen Feng were astonished at first, they quickly calmed down and poured energy into the small flags on the ground, causing them to erupt with black light. Following which, the two flags began to move once again. Although they weren't fast, they were able to charge through the domain and charge toward Chu Feng. But they couldn't get close for a moment. Chu Feng could dodge. Boom, boom, boom. Chen Pu attacked. Energy beams flew out continuously from his palm in an attempt to kill the distant Chu Feng. But the domain runes were still there and didn't completely lose its effectiveness. Hence, he couldn't do anything to Chu Feng for a moment. Everyone outside was paying close attention. The native evolvers were sighing in admiration at Chu Feng's attainments and domains. They were also in awe of Penglai for actually being able to break the domain in such a manner. Some people sighed. No wonder Penglai dared to consider itself the orthodox lineage. Not only were they powerful, but they also possessed many secret treasures left behind from ancient times. They gave people an unfathomable feeling. Chen Pu smiled faintly and said, Chu Feng, where can you escape to? This domain is like a well. We'll catch you in the end, but do you dare jump out of this well? The Outer Realm Dao friends will immediately capture you. Everyone saw that Chu Feng's range of movement had shrunk. If they closed in, he would be blocked by the two elders sooner or later. The situation was becoming more and more dangerous. Outside the domain, Zhu Qingquan couldn't sit still anymore. Seeing Chu Feng being pushed into a corner, he wanted to dive down and kill him. That head was equivalent to a saint's bronze seal. The sea of crocodiles also became restless because the opportunity was right in front of them. Dao friends, I'll help you. Finally, Zhu Qingquan couldn't bear it anymore and rushed in immediately. With two domain-breaking flags, this domain couldn't trap him. It could only slow him down. The sea of crocodiles licked his lips. His tongue was scarlet, and his teeth were white and cold. He also took a step forward and wanted to snatch Chu Feng's head. In truth, behind them, a dozen or so people had moved immediately. They arrived at the edge of the domain in the blink of an eye and were ready to kill with blazing eyes. Li Qing wanted to stop them, but seeing that Saintlessly Lin didn't say anything, he could only shut up and watch the situation unfold. One person couldn't change anything. Chen Pu laughed loudly and said, Since the two Dao friends have also entered, then let's end this hunting game. He's just a fake Heaven's Chosen. What does he count for? Kill him immediately. At this point, he and Chen Feng each produced a small black triangular flag. They were less than the size of a palm and were refined from profound magnets. With two ripping sounds, they stabbed them into the ground. In the blink of an eye, the entire domain became silent. No more domain runes flickered as it was completely fixed in place. These two old fellows had actually brought 4 domain-breaking flags and had been holding back all along. They were toying with Chu Feng and only revealed their trump cards now. How boring. I wanted to slowly torment you, like I'm torturing an eagle. In the end, you're nothing more than this. I'll just take your life early. Chun Pu sneered. You're just a frog in a jar. Do you really think you're the heavens chosen? I can tell you clearly that this kind of identity has nothing to do with you. Chun Feng ridiculed. However, the two of them didn't go forward and left the opportunity to behead Chu Feng to the Outer Realm people. That was because there were too many people glaring at them like tigers watching their prey. Zhu Qingquan and Yi Hai were within the domain, and both of them wanted to take Chu Feng's head and exchange it for the Saint Bronze Seal. Although Chun Feng and Chun Pu also wanted it, they wisely retreated. They didn't want to be besieged by the 20 to 30 carefree realm descenders. With a swoosh, Zhu Qingquan landed immediately and transformed back into his human form. He was 3 meters tall, with a head full of red hair and an ominous glint in his eyes. He raised his hand and grabbed at Chu Feng. Native, you actually dared injure me earlier. Now, I can crush you to death with one hand. Who do you think you are? He shouted loudly with surging ferocity. Bang! At the critical moment, Yi Hai moved later but arrived first. He exchanged a palm strike with Zhu Qingquan and directly pushed him back a few steps. Yi Hai also wanted to take Chu Feng's head and wouldn't give way at the critical moment. Yi Hai. Zhu Qingquan's eyes were cold. Brother Zhu, I'm sorry. I also want the Saint Bronze Seal. This head is mine. Yi Hai grinned and quickly waved his left palm at Chu Feng. Cold light flickered as it transformed into a large, sharp claw to reap lives. At the same time, he laughed sinisterly at Chu Feng and said, a mere native like you can actually exchange for a Saint Bronze Seal. You've really struck it rich. Boom! Zhu Qingquan stretched out his right arm and transformed it into a dark red Een Sparrow wing. He blocked in front of Yi Hai and didn't allow Yi Hai to kill Chu Feng first. The collision between the two produced a glaring ball of energy. He's mine. This rebel can only be killed by me, Zhu Qingquan said coldly. Yi Hai grinned, revealing his snow-white teeth. No, let me do it. Brother Zhu is injured. Go and recuperate. I love torturing and killing natives like this. Let me fulfill my wish. He was warning Zhu Qingquan that an injured body wasn't his match. The two exchanged blows in the blink of an eye. Moreover, they would stretch out their hands to grab Chu Feng from time to time. Both want to cut off his head first. In their eyes, Chu Feng was already an object with no autonomy. Both wanted to snatch his head and exchange it for fortunes. The native evolvers felt their hearts sink after seeing this scene. Chu Feng was a well-known figure among the native evolvers, but now he had no status and was being fought over like a commodity by two descenders. It was truly pitiful. Jiang Luoxin's beautiful face turned pale. She clenched her fists and sighed for Chu Feng. Even those corporate members who weren't on good terms with Chu Feng in the past felt sympathy for him. The young Xingyi Fist Grandmaster, Su Qing, watched on expressionlessly. This time, Princess Lin revealed an astonished expression and frowned. She was observing Chu Feng and didn't jump to conclusions as early as she did on Mount Lu. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, the 10-odd experts who had been observing from the outer realm all rushed in. That was because they were certain that the domain had been frozen. They were all carefree realm evolvers. Their eyes were burning with passion as they charged forward to seize Chu Feng's head. They no longer had any misgivings. That was because Zhu Qingquan and Yi Hai had helped them scout out the path and were about to successfully behead their prey. This proved that this place was safe. Chu Feng was forced into a corner with the dragon-locking pillars under his feet. He watched expressionlessly as Zhu Qingquan and Yi Hai acted domineeringly and fought over him. Only when the 10-odd people had rushed in did he reveal a grim smile. He stomped down with great force, emitting a flood dragon cry and causing the ground to erupt with brilliance. The dragon-locking pillars were wondrous objects from the southern sea. After being refined many times by the revered 8 trigrams furnace, 2 layers of its mysteries had been uncovered and it had been upgraded twice. At present, he had only used the upgraded ghostly labyrinth and had yet to use the other layer of domains. Now, with a boom, Light erupted from all directions, and the faint cry of a flood dragon could be heard. Light erupted, and the area immediately collapsed. There was a difference in strength between domains. Presently, the mysterious dragon-locking pillar was surging with splendor and moving underground. It directly turned the sky and earth upside down. Within a split second, the 4-domain breaking flags on the ground were all cracked and then broken. In the blink of an eye, the area blossomed with bloody light. Chu Feng hacked at Zhu Qingquan with the bronze weapon in his hand without the slightest hesitation, sending one of his arms flying. Ah! Zhu Qingquan cried out miserably because he felt as if he had sunk into a swamp and could hardly move. This was the first time the dragon-locking pillar's mysteries had appeared. The next moment, Chu Feng brandished his sword 3 times in succession, but was blocked by Zhu Qingquan's arms and legs with great difficulty. This also meant that all 4 of his limbs had fallen to the ground. Boom! Chu Feng swung his left fist and smashed it into his body. It directly pierced through his abdomen and caused fresh blood to pour out. At the same time, the bronze sword in his right hand sliced off Yihai's struggling tail, causing blood to blossom. Thump, thump, thump! Zhu Qingquan's miserable cries turned weak after only a few punches. He had been blasted apart by Chu Feng's fists. His body was torn into pieces, and his head rolled onto the ground. Do you really think I can't beat you because your skin is so thick? Earlier, I just didn't want to shed all pretenses of cordiality and gave Li Qing face. But since you're the 9 Een Sparrow's descendant and want to kill me, what's the point of leaving you alive? With just a few punches, Chu Feng had shattered Zhu Qingquan, leaving behind only a head struggling on its deathbed. At the same time, Chu Feng's bronze sword wasn't idle either. While speaking, it had already chopped off Yihai's limbs, causing him to howl incessantly. Thump! Then, he rushed forward and kicked with both feet, crushing the ferocious human-shaped crocodile. Then, he kicked it into pieces, leaving only a head rolling on the ground, looking at him with a look of fear in its eyes. The 10-odd Outer Realm entities who had charged into the domain felt a chill run through their bodies and were all trembling. Not far away, Chun Pu and Chun Feng felt their scalps go numb. Chun Feng had already taken out an item and was activating it with all his might. It emitted a black light which covered his body. Chu Feng was shocked. He rushed forward and, with a wave of his hand, the ground rumbled as a dragon-locking pillar appeared. He picked it up and smashed it forward with all his might. That was because he had already guessed what it was. The 2 old fellows from Peng Lai were too ruthless and had made ample preparations. As expected, they had come to destroy him. If he couldn't stop them, it would be quite troublesome. The dragon-locking pillar was even thicker than a pillar. It was extremely terrifying as it was being used as a weapon by Chu Feng. It smashed the black light until it swayed and almost exploded. With a bang, Chun Pu was finally shaken out of the range of the black light. His face immediately turned deathly pale, and his lips trembled as he said in a trembling voice, "Little friend Chu Feng, let's talk things out." Chu Feng swung his sword and directly beheaded him. He then picked up the severed head and retreated. Chun Pu had lost his body, but his head was still trembling and struggling. It let out a spiritual howl filled with incomparable hatred and resentment. "Shut up." As Chu Feng retreated rapidly, he slapped the head twice in the face and immediately quieted him down. In the blink of an eye, he had collected 3 heads and reversed the situation. Everyone in the vicinity was shaken. To Chun Pu, Zhu Qingquan, and Yihai it was too painful. Only their heads were left struggling at death's door. It was truly heaven and hell with a single thought. Chapter 452. Moments later, the group of people still wanted to surround and attack Chu Feng. In the blink of an eye, the grassland was stained with blood. The 12-odd experts felt as though they had sunk into a swamp and couldn't break free. Even Chun Pu had been beheaded by Chu Feng in one slash. The reversal of the situation left everyone speechless. However, it was also at this time that Chu Feng retreated explosively. He was even more decisive than when he had attacked just now. He raised his speed to the limit and wanted to leave this area. Boom! At the same time, the earth and rocks were tossed about. He was using his domain techniques to guide the dragon-locking pillars away. The native evolvers were all astonished. Why did Chu Feng turn around and leave when he held the advantage? Why didn't he continue the attack? A mass of black light blossomed in the field and spread out continuously. It surged in all directions and enveloped the domains Chu Feng had set up earlier. Only at this point did people realize why Chu Feng was so decisive. The black light was slow at first, but its momentum was astonishing later on. It was like an unstoppable mountain flood bursting through a dike. In the blink of an eye, the entire area was covered by the black light. Chu Feng exhausted all his strength and only managed to bring out 2 dragon-locking pillars. He also carried the 3 heads by their hair and brought them out together. Saint Child Li Qing's pupils constricted as he stared at the black light spreading out in the field. He revealed an astonished expression and sighed. The seal of domain suppression actually exists. Saintess Li Lin was also moved as she gazed at the field. There was a stone seal in Chen Feng's hand. It was completely black and full of cracks. It was precisely this stone that was emitting light and covering that area. Crack! Another crack appeared on the stone seal as the black light completely covered the domains laid down by Chu Feng. It seemed it would fall apart at any moment. This was an antique. This was the reason why Chu Feng had retreated so quickly. He recognized at a glance that this was a seal of domain suppression and was quite similar to some of the records in the Moon's domain records. As the name implied, this kind of seal could suppress domains. The seal of domain suppression was usually made by famed domain experts. This item was extremely difficult to refine and had high requirements for materials. It was bound to be a heavenly treasure. Additionally, the densely packed domain runes carved within were complex and profound. Many domain masters poured their entire lives into creating a seal of domain suppression, but were unable to do so. Chen Feng's heart was aching. This stone seal was an antique from Penglai. In ancient times, it had been hit by a rare treasure and was almost destroyed. There were many cracks on it, and every time it was used, there would be one more crack. According to their estimation, it could only be used 3 or 4 more times. And today, he had used it again. How could Chen Feng not feel heartache? This was an ancient artifact that was even rarer and more precious than the domain-breaking flag. Of course, his heart ached because his brother, Chun Pu, had been beheaded by Chu Feng, and his head had been snatched away. This caused his eyes to turn red. Chu Feng, let Chen Pu come back. He tried to speak as slowly as possible. Carefree realm beings could live for a short period of time after being beheaded. If they were treated in time and the head was connected to the body, they could naturally live. Chu Feng stared at the black stone seal in his hand, his eyes blazing. He really wanted to snatch it from his enemy. The seal of domain suppression was exceptionally precious. It could suppress domains and was the bane of many domain researchers. Of course, if the domain was powerful enough, even the seal of domain suppression would be useless. Everything was relative. Additionally, the seal of domain suppression had a time limit. It would need to cool down for several days after each use. Otherwise, it would disintegrate. The main reason was that the runes within were too profound and complex. Once activated, it would consume a great deal of the stone seal's materials. Continuous activation would cause the stone seal to collapse. Chu Feng felt that this seal of domain suppression wasn't simple at all. If it didn't have any cracks, it would most likely be a great weapon, far surpassing all kinds of weapons and secret treasures. If he could seize it, he could use it to enter some secret lands in the famed mountains and great rivers to pluck divine mutant fruits. The place he wanted to go the most was the pilgrimage grounds. There were peaches of immortality and pills on that altar. With the seal of domain suppression and his domain techniques, he might be able to ascend the altar and take away those rare offerings. At that time, he would be able to evolve frantically. Return my dragon-locking pillars, Chu Feng demanded from Chen Feng. In the end, two of the dragon-locking pillars were trapped within the black light of the seal of domain suppression and couldn't be brought out. At this time, the dozen or so experts who had sunk into a quagmire recovered and could move again. They weren't affected by the black light, and all of them revealed cold intent as they stared at Chu Feng. The next moment, they rushed out and pounced toward Chu Feng. Chi chi chi. The two dragon-locking pillars Chu Feng had brought out sank into the ground. Moreover, he had shot out the magnetic stones he had carved in the spatial bottle. They were densely packed and were glowing here. In the blink of an eye, the dozen or so people stopped and didn't dare act rashly. Zhu Qingquan and Yi Hai's heads were still in his hands. Chu Feng, let go of my brother. Chun Feng spoke once more. Afterwards, he transmitted his voice to the dozen or so people, saying, he's missing two dragon-locking pillars, and the domain he's laid out is broken. There's nothing to fear. A single attack from you will be enough to disintegrate it and kill him in an instant. As expected, the dozen or so people revealed odd expressions and closed in together. Chu Feng's expression was grave and stern as he said, all of you, stop. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Then he lifted Chun Pu's head and slapped it a dozen times in one go. The sounds were clear and ear-splitting, and his entire head was almost smashed. You? Chun Pu was dizzy and disoriented. He had lost his body below the neck and was very weak. He felt extremely humiliated after being slapped. He wanted to go crazy and use his spiritual power to attack, but for some reason, his spirit would be suppressed like rootless duckweed as soon as he approached Chu Feng. In the end, he was horrified to find that the reason was the monastic robe wrapped around Chu Feng's clothes. You still want to attack me? Chu Feng looked down at him and said, you used to think you were infallible and judge the world. Have you forgotten what I said to you? What you said to me when you saw your head fall to the ground was laughable. Why aren't you guys stopping? Chu Feng suddenly looked up and saw the dozen or so people approaching. Then, with a thump, he kicked Chun Pu's head into the air, splitting it into pieces in the air. It hurt so much. Chun Feng cried out, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets. He had instigated the dozen or so people to force and kill Chu Feng. But in the end, Chu Feng was too decisive and had killed his brother with a kick. Still not stopping? Chu Feng picked up Zhu Qingquan and Yi Hai's heads and looked at the dozen or so carefree realm experts. No, Zhu Qingquan was very weak, but he was still wailing and begging for them to stop. Yi Hai also almost collapsed. He really didn't want to die and was also begging for those people to retreat. Chu Feng, stop. Otherwise, you won't have a good end. The dozen or so people stopped, but a black-clothed man threatened him, telling him to put down Zhu Qingquan and Yi Hai. Thump! Without another word, Chu Feng stabbed Zhu Qingquan's head, killing him in both body and soul. You actually dare. How dare you? The black-clothed man was a black tiger. At this moment, he was furious. If news of this were to spread, the Een Sparrow bloodline might blame him for Zhu Qingquan's death. Buffed. After hearing the black tiger's shout, Chu Feng slashed out and completely killed Yi Hai. He was fairly decisive. The black tiger's face turned green. He couldn't take this blame. The experts of the two races had been cleanly killed by Chu Feng because of his shout. This has nothing to do with me, he said to the people around him. It's precisely because you forced me that I had no choice but to kill, Chu Feng said indifferently. The black tiger's hair stood on end. He absolutely couldn't take this kind of blame. He shouted, I must kill you. Everyone, let's join hands to destroy his damaged domain. At this time, Chun Feng left behind the seal of domain suppression and had Chun Sheng stand guard there. He himself walked out of the dark light with a malevolent expression. He said coldly, Chu Feng, I'll grind your bones to dust. At this time, the dozen or so people all moved. They closed in together to break the domain that didn't pose too much of a threat. Li Qing wanted to stop them, but at this time, he discovered that Sainus Li Lin was also moving. Her eyes flickered as she also wanted to kill Chu Feng. He'll be killed in the end. It's better to leave his head for me to exchange for the Saint Bronze seal. These were Li Lin's words. She was also approaching that area. In the end, Only Li Qing and the 6 others remained in place. They glanced at each other, but in the end, they didn't stop them or attack. In the distance, the evolvers from Earth felt that Chu Feng was under too much pressure and had lost his sense of propriety. He shouldn't have killed Chen Pu, Zhu Qingquan, and Yi Hai completely. It would have been better to keep them as hostages. As they saw it, Chu Feng had fallen into a desperate situation. Boom! The dozen or so people attacked together and broke the domain. Many magnetic stones were blasted apart, and even the 2 dragon-locking pillars were sent flying. Chu Feng, you evil creature, hand over your life. Chen Feng shouted angrily. He was the first to charge over and was about to kill Chu Feng. The black tiger cried out, "Wait, let me do it. I must capture him alive and wash away my injustice. Zhu Qingquan and Yi Hai's deaths really have nothing to do with me." Although Chen Feng wanted to kill Chu Feng immediately, he couldn't bring himself to do so in the face of an expert from the outer realm. He really stopped in his tracks. Hell, let me do it. The evolver from the Earth demonic bear race spoke. After transforming into human form, he was 10 meters tall like an iron tower. At this moment, he took a step forward and wanted to be the first to attack. A woman in a bright red dress laughed lightly. Her large eyes were bright and limpid, and even the tips of her brows were charming. She said, "Stop fighting. It's just right for me to kill him." Another person retorted, "Hong Ling, you're also a human. It's not good to kill your own kind like this. Let's do it." This was an earthen yellow giant over 30 meters tall. He stretched out a large hand and grabbed toward Chu Feng. However, he was stopped. Doubtlessly, the battle between Zhu Qingquan and Yi Hai was happening again. This time, there were more experts participating. There were over a dozen of them. Now that there were no domains and no dangers, they naturally wanted to snatch heads just to exchange for the St. Bronze seal. "You guys really treat me like I'm nothing." Chu Feng spoke. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he swept his gaze over everyone. Some people revealed expressions of disdain and directly berated him. "It seems there's only you guys. If no one else comes forward, then I won't wait any longer." Chu Feng muttered to himself. "Brat, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Without the domains, I can slap you to death with one slap." The black tiger roared and leapt forward to attack. Chu Feng's eyes erupted with beams of incomparably cold light as he stared fixedly at him and met the attack head-on. "Ah, you've got guts. You actually dare attack me." The black tiger felt that his dignity had been challenged. That was because Chu Feng didn't use the domains and directly fought him with physical strength. Boom! The two collided. The wind from their fists was vast, and the tiger's claws were sharp. They actually met force with force. Puffed. Almost instantly, Black Tiger let out a blood-curdling screech. He had been beaten into a pulp by Chu Feng's fists. The Black Tiger was stunned, even in death. It was as if he had seen a ghost. Chi! A red radiance flickered. It was precisely the girl named Hong Ling who had taken action. She originally wanted to stop the Black Tiger from killing Chu Feng. She wanted to snatch his head, but after seeing the Black Tiger die miserably, her palm immediately slapped toward Chu Feng. Bang, bang, bang. After several collisions, Chu Feng used the Demon Ox fist with incomparable ferocity and killed the girl named Hong Ling. Her forehead looked as if it had been pierced by a bull's horn, but it was actually a fist hole. A native, the Earth Demon Bear, who was just about to speak, immediately shut his mouth with an astonished expression. Both the Black Tiger and Hong Ling had been killed in such a short period of time. In the blink of an eye, Chu Feng had found him. He soared through the air like a flood dragon and smashed toward him with his demon flood dragon, fist accompanied by a spiraling force. The two exchanged fierce blows, but after 10 moves, this valiant Earth Demon Bear was torn into two by Chu Feng's spiraling demon flood dragon fist. Blood splattered in all directions. What had happened? Everyone was astonished. A shackled realm cultivator was killing a carefree realm entity. Was he trying to defy the heavens? Moreover, he didn't rely on domains or secret treasures. He had killed them with his bare hands. Chu Feng, who do you think you are? How dare you oppose our Penglai orthodox lineage? This old man will hack you into 1,000 pieces." Chun Feng's face contorted into a sinister expression. At first, he was still cursing, but in the end, his voice weakened and soon became silent. 3 carefree realm experts had fallen in the blink of an eye. It was too strange. All of this had happened in an instant, and this made his hair stand on end. At this time, Chu Feng just so happened to have his eyes on him. He rushed over with a single step and was about to kill him. It's because of the monastic robe he's wearing. Who would have thought that it's a Buddhist secret treasure containing the equality of all life domain? At this time, the Saintess Li Lin arrived. She had already arrived and revealed the truth. The carefree realm experts at the scene were startled after hearing this. Soon after, they came to and revealed astonished expressions. The equality of all life was a domain unique to the Buddhist race. It was quite odd because within its range of effect, it could suppress 2 people of different realms to the same level. To the great experts of the Buddhist race, it was impossible for them to use this kind of monastic robe domain because it would only bring them bad luck. Normally, it was only used by their disciples. At this time, Chu Feng met Chun Feng head-on. He had already made his move, decisive and tyrannical. Amidst whistling wind from his fists, a black yak appeared. It was a strange phenomenon as it tore through the starry skies. Boom, boom, boom. Chu Feng suppressed Chun Feng to the point where he had no temper. This kind of heavy punch caused Chun Feng to cough up large mouthfuls of blood continuously. His body was full of cracks. In a battle at the same level, Chu Feng's performance was too frightening. Peng Lai Orthodox lineage? It's only SOSO. In just 5 moves, Chu Feng had turned one of Chun Feng's arms into a mass of bloody mist, following which he pulled with all his might. Chun Feng screamed miserably as half of his body was torn off. In the same realm, the disparity was too great. In the rear, Li Qing's pupils constricted as he muttered to himself. Even on those famous planets, he's still a saint-child-level character. In this area, the native evolvers of Earth saw everything clearly. They were all shocked and then felt their blood surge. Chu Feng could actually slaughter so many carefree realm experts. At this time, someone wanted to escape, but Chu Feng suddenly shook his monastic robe. Scarlet light enveloped the area, and the monastic robe rapidly enlarged like a red ocean, blocking everyone's path of retreat. Since everyone wants to kill me, then let's fight to our heart's content, Chu Feng said coldly. He was like a great demon king as he looked down on everyone. Does everyone have a monthly ticket? Please give us a monthly ticket and support the holy ground. Chapter 453. Just as the hunters were about to slaughter the prey in the pit in delight, they suddenly discovered that it was a prehistoric beast leaping up with a bitter, baleful aura. One could easily imagine their mood. Now, the dozen or so carefree realm evolvers were in such a mood. Just now, they were fighting over Chu Feng's head, all of them wanting to be the first to chop it off. Who would have thought that he would transform into a great demon king in the blink of an eye? It was too sudden. This kind of unforeseen event exceeded everyone's expectations. The group of people who had attacked were all dumbfounded and still found it hard to believe. Black Tiger, the Earth Demon Bear, and Hongling's bodies had been torn to pieces and were stained with blood. This was proof of what had just happened and made them tremble in fear. The scarlet monastic robe hid the sky and the earth. When it trembled, it was like an undulating sea of blood, imprisoning everyone within and preventing them from leaving. Chun Feng howled. Among those who had attacked just now, only he was still alive. Half of his body had been torn off and was rolling about on the red monastic robe. The scarlet blood did not stain the robe. Living like this was even more unbearable than dying. Firstly, the physical pain was unbearable, and secondly, the mental torment had almost caused him to collapse. The shackled realm brat he had looked down on and threatened to turn his bones into ashes had not only killed his brother Chin Pu, but also crippled him. At this time, Chu Feng was as still as a boulder. He didn't move at all and stood on the monastic robe. His eyes swept over these people like cold lightning, causing the group of hunters to feel their scalps go numb and their hair stand on end. His killing intent was too strong. Although he didn't move, this kind of dangerous posture and aura directly attacked the group of people and caused their hearts to palpitate. The Buddhist race's secret domain, monastic robe, restricts our strength. We have to charge out and not let him act viciously. Someone spoke and joined forces with the others to attack. The current situation was extremely bad for them. They were trapped on this monastic robe and were being watched by a native like a demon king. Everyone was in danger. This was somewhat absurd. They were all evolvers of the carefree realm, but now they were so passive and incomparably afraid of their original prey. Boom! Chu Feng took the initiative to attack this group of people alone. In the eyes of the native evolvers of Earth, this was simply madness. A shackled realm cultivator fighting against a group of carefree realm enemies. The 10-meter-tall giant roared, his pores spewing out earthen yellow air currents. The energy around his body skyrocketed as he raised his millstone-sized fist and smashed it towards Chu Feng. This entire space trembled. Breaking through the sound barrier was too easy for creatures at this level. Together with such a large fist, the power was truly terrifying. Explosions sounded in the air. White mist surged like immortal mist, exploding here, flying in all directions. This was actually a very normal physical phenomenon. However, in ancient times, ordinary people did not understand this and regarded this white gas as immortal mist. Thus, there were all sorts of legends about immortals. Boom! Chu Feng didn't dodge. His body glowed as if he was made of divine glazed gold. He directly charged forward while circulating the thunderous breathing technique. Thunder rumbled within his body as his fists turned a faint golden color. His brute strength increased exponentially, especially now that he was standing on the monastic robe, and circulating this breathing technique was a perfect match. Both his mental and physical states were raised to their peak. The two fists collided with a loud bang. Their sizes were completely different, but in the end, it was the giant who let out a muffled groan. His face contorted as he staggered back. That was because the fingers on his fist had been broken and blood was flowing out in torrents. Chu Feng's fist was too tyrannical. Once the thunderous breathing technique was activated, it strengthened his body and made him seem like an indestructible golden body. Attack together and kill him. A fair-skinned, sinister-looking young human evolver shouted. Although he was also a human, he came from a certain planet in the outer realms and had no sense of identity with the people of Earth. He called for everyone to surround and attack Chu Feng. That's right. Now is not the time to be arrogant. Throw away all face and join hands to kill him. A white-robed lady responded. This was also a human from another vital planet. Her temperament was extraordinary, and her appearance was beautiful and refined. She also called for everyone to join hands and kill Chu Feng. I hate trash like you the most, Chu Feng said coldly. If he was in the outer realms and had entered a backward planet to search for fortunes, he wouldn't have met someone from the same race. Boom! Chu Feng's entire body was gushing with golden light as the thunderous breathing technique surged. Not only was his mouth and nose suffused with golden mist, but even his entire body was covered in it. His pores were relaxed, and it was as if he had become one with the heaven and earth. He first locked onto that man and directly rushed over. He didn't use any fancy moves and directly smashed his fist down. Every strike caused the void to resonate and the air to explode. This sinister-looking young man couldn't withstand such a heavy punch. Even though he did his best to block with his palms, his hands were still broken and dripping with blood. Bang, 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 following which his arms spasmed and exploded from Chu Feng's fists. He let out a low roar of pain, and his originally fair face became even more deathly pale. Following which, Chu Feng's fist penetrated his chest. The thunderous breathing technique erupted, and Chu Feng's fist glowed with dazzling golden light like a blooming sun. With a bang, not only did the man's body split into pieces and emitted golden light, but even his skull cracked, and he died on the spot. He was too unwilling to accept this. He was originally an expert of the carefree realm, but he couldn't display his full strength here. His body was disintegrated by a native. And you, while being attacked from all sides, Chu Feng was like a ferocious beast released from its cage. He suddenly turned around and fixed his eyes on the white-clothed woman. He was determined to kill her alone. The fist light was dazzling. Chu Feng withstood the great pressure here as he fought against the group of enemies and chased after the woman. He was like a human-shaped bolt of lightning flying at a frighteningly fast speed. Following which, after catching up to the woman, he blasted out 6 consecutive lightning-like fists. They interweaved with each other, blazing and resplendent, and their auras were abnormally terrifying. With a bang, the woman disintegrated and let out a miserable and resentful cry. At the last moment, she was killed in front of everyone while enduring the pain and terror. Chen Feng immediately stopped howling. He was so frightened that his face had turned pale. He hid in a corner of the monastic robe and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. From his point of view, Chu Feng was like the cub of an ancient demonic tiger that was in charge of slaughter. He had been born with an overflowing, baleful aura and was about to kill in all directions. It was too late for him to regret. Peng Lai's losses today were too great. He really shouldn't have listened to Chen Sheng's advice and come here to stir up trouble. This was purely courting death. Kill. The group of people from the outer realms had no other choice. They were trapped here and had long since seen Chu Feng's killing intent. He definitely didn't want to let them go, so they could only fight to the death to break out of the encirclement. Chu Feng also encountered some trouble when he attacked. For example, a winged black snake spat out cold air that actually contained the power of extreme. Although it wasn't very dense and could even be said to be thin, it still caught him off guard and caused him to suffer losses. One of his arms was almost frozen, and his blood froze in a short moment. In the end, the others seized the opportunity to land their palms, fists, and claws on his body, causing blood to flow from the corner of his mouth as he was sent flying. Chu Feng locked onto it and focused on taking care of it. He struck the winged black flying snake so hard that its scales fell off, and it almost broke into 2 pieces. I choose you. You contain the power of extreme. I'll keep you as an ingredient. With a swoosh, Chu Feng took out the spirit-binding rope and didn't chase after it. He directly used his secret treasure to deal with the snake. The scene was strange. A light golden grass rope flew out and chased after the black flying snake like a giant snake. In the end, it was tied up firmly. The flying snake was shocked and furious. It couldn't break free and was captured alive. Bang! A silver-colored black tortoise charged over and struck Chu Feng's back. This was truly unavoidable because there were experts surrounding him and they were attacking him from all sides. The silver tortoise succeeded in its attack and caused Chu Feng to stagger. Even his bones were cracking. Fortunately, when he circulated the thunderous breathing technique, it was as if he was possessed by a golden body. His physique, which was already far superior to others, became even more tenacious and difficult to shake. Chu Feng was only lightly injured. He coughed out some blood and leapt up again to fight fiercely with them. According to my previous experiences, I'll most likely go crazy from hunger when I enter the carefree realm. I'll prepare some ingredients in advance. I'll count you in. Chu Feng stared at the silver tortoise. This silver tortoise was too sturdy. It was the only creature that Chu Feng hadn't injured. Moreover, it had collided with him several times and injured him instead. Now that Chu Feng had focused his attention on it, the silver tortoise immediately sensed danger. Chu Feng formed a fist seal and combined the demon flood dragon fists and demon ox fists into one. At the same time, he circulated the thunderous breathing technique. His fists emitted an intimidating radiance and surged with energy like lava. Bang, bang, bang. He stared at a certain part of the silver tortoise and bombarded it continuously. In the end, cracks began to appear on the tortoise's shell. If this continued, it would surely explode. Swoosh! Chu Feng used the multicolored net to bind the silver tortoise and capture it alive. The silver tortoise felt sullen. It was extremely dangerous for outer realm creatures to cross over. In order to protect itself, it had almost destroyed all the secret treasures it had brought with it. Now, it actually had no weapon to use. Next, Chu Feng swept his gaze over everyone. Apparently, he wouldn't capture it alive and was about to start a massacre. Since you're not suitable ingredients, all of you can die. When Chu Feng said these words, everyone's faces turned ashen. What did he take them for? Boom. The battle became more and more intense. They attacked together and attacked Chu Feng. Puffed. A mountain rat that was even larger than an elephant was blasted into the air by Chu Feng's fist, its razor-sharp teeth flying out in all directions. A crystal man was holding a crystal mirror that could actually draw on the flames of the sun and almost injure Chu Feng. The raging flames contained a portion of the sun's essence flames. Clang! The sound of the bell lingered in the air. A large bell appeared outside Chu Feng's body and blocked the sun's flames from corroding him. His defensive power rose sharply. This was the embodiment of the Xingyi 12 true forms. He had integrated the Demon Ox Fist and Demon Flood Dragon Fist into it. At the same time, he circulated the thunderous breathing technique. Chu Feng immediately became even more terrifying. Kacha! In the end, this crystal man was also killed by Chu Feng. He was directly smashed into pieces by the large bell outside his body. In the distance, Chun Sheng was in charge of guarding the seal of domain suppression. At the same time, he was also watching the battle. His face had long since turned deathly pale. The monastic robe was dotted with scarlet spots and corpses. He felt a chill run down his spine when he saw Chun Feng being torn apart and struggling at death's door. He didn't want to stay a moment longer and turned to flee. However, Chu Feng had been paying attention to the surroundings all this time. In the blink of an eye, he threw out a dark red spear with a deafening sonic boom. Chun Sheng was directly nailed to the ground by the dark red spear. A large part of his body exploded and blood splattered on the grassland. He screamed miserably and then fainted. It was difficult for him to escape. Meanwhile, the battle on the monastic robe was also becoming increasingly intense. Roar! The 30-meter tall giant mutated. Blood gushed out from his pores, but the surface of his body had turned golden. His strength had increased by a large margin. He had turned into a golden giant. Such a huge body and such a ferocious fist imprint bombarded Chu Feng with all his might. He was burning his true blood and manifesting his ancestral bloodline in a decisive battle to the death. As expected, after his strength had increased dramatically, he could even fight head-on against Chu Feng with the energy bell hanging outside his body. The sound of the bell lingered in the air as energy gushed out. The golden giant possessed boundless strength and was extremely terrifying. Unfortunately, his ancestral blood was limited and couldn't last for long. Moreover, while he could still fight fiercely before his golden blood was exhausted, he was already showing signs of defeat. After exchanging over 100 blows, Chu Feng sent his huge body flying with a bang. His body was covered in blood, and a terrifying fist hole had appeared on his chest. Energy exploded there, destroying his faint golden heart. The golden giant was completely dispirited, and the ominous glint in his eyes had dimmed considerably. Bang! In the end, he was kicked in the head by Chu Feng and died a violent death. It could be said that the battle here was fast and fierce. At the same time, it was also very cold-blooded and cruel. This was how life and death battles were. Whoever dared to show mercy might die themselves. In the blink of an eye, the vast monastic robe was stained with blood, and corpses were strewn everywhere. Only a few people were left. Ear-splitting buzzing sounds rang out. A flying locust with a human body and a locust head flapped its wings. It flew around Chu Feng and shot out sword light. Its speed was very fast, but it couldn't pierce through the energy bell. Boom! The kidney energy in Chu Feng's body surged and interweaved into a pair of light wings. He soared into the sky and smashed the locust into pieces with a single punch. The flying locust-crowned prince won't let you go." The locust spirit howled unwillingly, but it couldn't change anything and died miserably on the spot. Next, Chu Feng swept through the group of enemies and killed the remaining people. Their corpses lay on the monastic robe, and Chun Feng, who only had half a body left, was also trampled to death. At the foot of Mount Putah, everyone was dumbfounded, especially the native evolvers. There wasn't a single one of them who wasn't trembling and felt their blood vessels expanding. This was truly a peerless demon king. The impact Chu Feng brought them was too great. He had killed a group of carefree realm enemies at the shackled realm. He was like a lion charging into a flock of sheep, sweeping through all of them. Saint Child Li Qing and the people around him all wore serious expressions. They were evaluating Chu Feng's true strength. He had destroyed all of them as easily as crushing dry weeds in a battle at the same level. This was very terrifying. From Li Qing's point of view, even Dao children from small planets wouldn't have this kind of combat strength. Chu Feng was enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Saint Child level characters from the glorious planet. Could it be that he has grasped an extraordinary breathing technique? Li Qing was suspicious. Chu Feng revealed an odd expression and said, "Come out." He could feel that there was another person behind the monastic robe. It was precisely that Saintess Li Lin. She was arranging something, but Chu Feng didn't care at all. Chapter 454. On the other side of the monastic robe, Saintess Li Lin had arranged the 6 gray stones in an orderly fashion. They were connected to form a hexagram and were actually attached to the blood-red monastic robe. Chu Feng frowned slightly. This beautiful woman also understood domains. The 6 gray stones possessed strong magnetism, and their magnetic fields were ridiculously high. He felt that they were extraordinary and probed them carefully. Chu Feng's heart skipped a beat because this wasn't an ordinary item. These were profound magnets that could be refined into objects needed by domain researchers. For instance, the domain breaking flag. Profound magnets were excellent materials and were countless times more valuable than magnetic crystals. Chu Feng's fiery eyes pierced through the monastic robe and shot out 2 beams of light. He stared fixedly at the 6 gray, profound magnets and felt a chill in his heart. There were domain runes within these stones. At this moment, he didn't go and observe those things that could easily cause him to grow needles. Instead, he focused on preparing for battle. Bang! Chu Feng immediately attacked. He shook the monastic robe and caused it to shake violently in an attempt to shake off the 6 profound magnets. He had already understood that the 6 profound magnets were some kind of integrated module with densely packed runes within. They couldn't compare to the 4 dragon-locking pillars, but the 6 stones could also form a powerful domain. Li Lin wanted to restrain his monastic robe. She had already attacked ruthlessly without making a sound. At the same time, as Chu Feng moved, Li Lin sensed something. An object appeared in her hand. It was glistening yellow and possessed a simple and unadorned aura. She pressed it directly against the monastic robe. That was a weapon belonging to the Buddhist race, the pestle. Little girl. Chu Feng's expression changed. He didn't think much of it before, but now he was incomparably serious. Saintess Li Lin wanted to restrain the monastic robe and then schemed to seize it. She was using the Buddhist race's treasured pestle to deal with the monastic robe with the assistance of the 6 profound magnets. If she were to succeed, Chu Feng would be in big trouble. Boom! The monastic robe danced and floated up in an instant. It was as if a scarlet ocean was rising and falling, followed by waves that struck the sky. Li Lin was very calm. Even though Chu Feng was like a great demon king just now and had killed a group of carefree realm evolvers here, she was still fearless. That was because she knew the other party was only relying on this monastic robe. Once it was paralyzed, the so-called shackles attacking the carefree realm would be impossible. Bang, bang, bang. The glistening yellow precious pestle in her hand shone and continuously struck the monastic robe, resonating with it. She wanted to seize the treasure. Dang! Chu Feng shook his monastic robe and rushed over. The bell above his head was engraved with images of various beasts from the Xingyi 12 true forms, as well as the flood dragon and the primordial yak. It was also emitting an astonishing mist. The monastic robe was stuck to the 6 profound magnets, but it was still able to unleash a portion of its domain power. The red light enveloped Li Lin. The equality of all life was a very strange domain, but it wasn't completely effective. That was because it was stuck by the 6 profound magnets and was greatly affected. The Kasaya's domain was unstable. Furthermore, Li Lin had the Buddhist clan's secret weapon, the treasure pestle, in her hands. She could pose a serious threat to Chu Feng. Obviously, Chu Feng was aware of the danger. The cry of a flood dragon rang out as Chu Feng used his domain methods to make the 2 brass pillars on the ground rush up. It was the dragon-locking pillars, and they whizzed into the monastic robe to suppress the 6 profound magnets. Although the 2 of them hadn't directly collided, both of them could encounter danger. Their domains were surging, and neither dared to be careless. Boom! A thunderous sound rang out as the red monastic robe erupted with a deafening sound. One could see that the golden lines on the monastic robe seemed to have come to life. They were surging and trembling as they interweaved together to form a glaring screen of light. The 6 profound magnets were also glowing. They were no longer gray and were trying their best to calm the monastic robe down. Li Lin held the treasure pestle in her hand. She was no longer targeting the monastic robe, but was instead attacking Chu Feng directly. That was because she had already broken free from the red light and was preserving her carefree realm energy. Fortunately, the dragon-locking pillars came in time. Although there were only 2 of them, they were still able to stop her. Everyone's hearts were pounding. Chu Feng had started a massacre and swept through the enemies. He had just reversed the situation when the Saintess Li Lin suddenly attacked and caused him to run into trouble. Among the Earth's native evolvers, the young Xingyi Grandmaster Su Qing was in a complicated mood. He clenched his fists one moment and then relaxed them the next as he stared at Chu Feng. His understanding of the Xingyi fist was rarely matched by others. One look at that large bell, and he knew that it was a manifestation of the Xingyi 12 true forms. Su Qing immediately understood that the person who had attacked him previously was Chu Feng. He had knocked him out, snatched the Xingyi true record, and even thrown him into the trash can. This was truly preposterous and intolerable. If he wasn't afraid of Chu Feng's strength, he would have already charged over. He absolutely couldn't let off this person who had sneak attacked him. This was too shameful and hateful. You, the great demon King Chu, have the nerve to attack me from behind? Hit me on the back of the head with a weapon. This was Su Qing's inner voice. Now he almost cursed out loud. He had always been calm and cautious, but now he was restless. Thump! At this time, the scene changed. The 6 profound magnets had all been removed by Chu Feng. The monastic robe erupted with red light and was completely released. Saintess Li Lin's expression changed slightly. She used the treasured pestle to break free from the red light and the battlefield. She rushed into the distance and stood on the grassy plains. Chu Feng gave chase and put away the 6 profound magnets. At the same time, the monastic robe shrunk and wrapped itself around his body, suffused with red light. This kind of defense was the most reliable. At the same time, a golden thread flew out from the monastic robe. It was connected to the Saintess Li Lin and seemed to be winding around his body. It wasn't a material object, but a golden beam of light. It had already wrapped around Li Lin's slender waist and was almost binding her. Li Lin activated the treasured pestle in an attempt to cut off the golden beam of light, but failed. That was a divine magnetic ray. It couldn't be cut off, but also couldn't injure her. The entanglement made it difficult for her to break free. Everyone was astonished. The 2 had been linked together through the monastic robe. "Let go," Li Lin said. Although she looked calm, a divine glint flashed through the depths of her eyes. She wanted to break free immediately. She was a saintess who had come from a certain planet. How could she be entangled with someone like this? "What do you mean, let go?" "Today, I might be able to fulfill my initial wish of capturing a saintess to be my maid." Chu Feng charged forward. He wanted to use the domain of the monastic robe to realize the equality of all life and capture her after a battle. Everyone was flabbergasted after hearing this. Did they hear wrongly? Demon King Chu wanted to capture a saintess to be his maid. Bang! Li Lin attacked. Her beautiful body emitted a holy and gentle radiance as she activated a secret technique. She brandished the treasured pestle and blasted towards Chu Feng. However, the equality of all life domain was activated once again as the two approached each other. She couldn't kill Chu Feng. Bang, bang, bang. After several collisions, the two separated and were connected by the golden beam of light. How about we call it a day? Li Lin spoke. She didn't want to be entangled with him any longer. For a saintess, this was equivalent to taking a big step back. You attacked me first. Now you want to leave after seeing that things aren't going well? How can it be so easy? Chu Feng wasn't willing to let her go. Although your monastic robe contains the equality of all life domain, it has a certain time limit. Are you sure you want to continue? You should know the consequences when the domain cooled down. Li Lin exposed him in front of everyone. In the distance, the people beside Saint Child Li Qing revealed odd expressions. This was a rare opportunity. They believed that Chu Feng couldn't possibly have any more tricks up his sleeves. However, Li Qing was as calm as before and had no intention of attacking. It's enough to capture you before the domains cool down, said Chu Feng. If it's a super large-scale domain like Divine Deliverance, then I'll admit defeat. If it's a destructive offensive domain like the Zhang's 6 Golden Body, then I'll also admit defeat. You're a little too conceited if you think you can capture me with a flawed equality of all life domain. Li Lin was as calm as ever. Her snow-white skin and beautiful countenance revealed a trace of coldness. This native had threatened to capture her alive to be his maid. To a saintess, this was disrespectful and even more so, teasing. There's nothing much to say. Let's see if I can capture you before the domains cool down or if you'll have the last laugh. Chu Feng attacked. He followed the golden beam of light between the two and tangled with them to attack. Bang, bang, bang. Li Lin felt extremely uncomfortable during this battle. Her strength had been pulled down and she was almost in danger. She had no choice but to soar into the air several times to evade. At this time, Chen Sheng, who had been nailed to the ground by the dark red spear, woke up. His body was covered in blood, and he was abnormally weak. He happened to see Chu Feng chasing after Saintess Li Lin and immediately widened his eyes. Chu Feng spat out a stream of metallic sword intent nurtured in his lungs and decapitated Chen Sheng. He then used his spiritual power to retract the spear. Afterwards, he temporarily abandoned Li Lin and began to attack continuously around the blacklight, producing a large number of magnetic stones. There was a seal of domain suppression within the blacklight, which caused Chu Feng's heart to burn with passion. He felt that this was the greatest harvest from this trip to Mount Putao. If he could obtain it, he would have the opportunity to ascend the altar at the pilgrimage grounds. Perhaps there would be an enormous fortune. He didn't dare charge into the blacklight because he was currently using the equality of all life domain. He was afraid that he would be suppressed after entering, so he could only let it cool down from the outside. Li Lin wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to escape, but found that she was bound by the golden light and couldn't pull away from Chu Feng. In the end, the black light dimmed and the seal of domain suppression cooled down. It turned into a black stone seal and was now completely still. With a swoosh, Chu Feng directly put it into the spatial bottle. This item was simply too important. He was incomparably excited, and even more excited than if he had just picked a basket of mutant fruits. One had to know that once he ascended the altar on Mount Tai, there were peaches of immortality and pills of unimaginable value. With his current attainments in domains and the seal of domain suppression, it was very likely that he would succeed. Afterwards, he put away the other 2 dragon-locking pillars. Brother Chu, let's stop here. Saint Child Li Qing suddenly spoke. Holy Son Li Qing, I appreciate the kindness you have shown me today. Chu Feng wasn't speaking irresponsibly. Li Qing hadn't taken action from start to finish today, and had obtained his favorable impression. Moreover, he urged, "Why don't we cooperate further and capture this saintess together?" Li Qing was immediately speechless. This person wasn't treating him as an outsider at all. "If you find it difficult, then forget it. I'll take action myself," said Chu Feng. He then began to chase after Li Lin with all his might. Saintess Li Lin was quite passive. There was a golden light bound around her waist, and she couldn't pull away from Chu Feng. Once he closed in, she could only passively face him under the equality of all life. Swoosh! In the end, she flew away like a mystical maiden in an attempt to escape. In the end, Chu Feng was dragged into the sky along with her. This was equivalent to chasing him down. Li Lin hesitated. She wanted to head to the famed mountains inland and ask those on the star passages to join hands and suppress Chu Feng. However, she didn't dare go because she was afraid that Chu Feng would erupt with terrifying destructive power once he entered the famed mountains. That was because there were many domains in those places. If he were to activate them, that place would become his home field. A commotion broke out at the foot of Mount Pudaw. Everyone was incomparably shocked. Chu Feng had killed powerful enemies in succession and was now chasing after the saintess. This was a major event that would surely cause a great commotion. In the end, Saintess Li Lin charged into the ocean and ran along the waves. She was persevering and wanted to exhaust Chu Feng to death. Once the time was up and the equality of all life domain would be ineffective, he would be dead for sure. However, it was quite dangerous during this period. She was connected to Chu Feng by the golden light beam and couldn't break free. Moreover, Chu Feng would approach her with just a bit of force and force her to fight. Being my maid won't make you feel wronged. Normally, you'll just have to massage my legs, rub my shoulders, serve me tea, and help me with grooming. Chu Feng shouted from behind. Black lines appeared on Saintess Li Lin's white forehead after hearing this. Wasn't this wronged? Even ordinary maids wouldn't be so miserable. All right, how's your tea art? How's your attainment in the four arts? It's said that a good maid must be able to go to the main hall and the kitchen. By the way, have you learned needlework? Oh, by the way, do you know how to make a bed? Saintess Li Lin almost flipped out after hearing these words. She really wanted to turn around and fight a decisive battle with this native. She wanted to destroy him. I'm very suspicious. Although your face isn't bad and your figure is upright, your strength is too weak. Are you really a saintess? You're only at the carefree realm, not much stronger than those I've killed. Chu Feng questioned from behind. His words implied that he was dissatisfied with this saintess's strength. Divine light shot out from Li Lin's beautiful eyes as she turned back to glare at him. But in the end, she once again left along the sea surface and wasn't willing to stay. She was somewhat angry. A stately visualization realm expert had mustered the courage to cripple a portion of her cultivation in order to cross over in advance. She had fallen to the carefree realm, but now she was being teased by a shackled realm thief. I'm warning you, if you don't stop now, I'll capture you and use you to warm my bed. Chu Feng shouted from behind. Li Lin sped up and finally submerged into the water. She had actually arrived at the Southern Sea and was charging straight for the Southern Sea Dragon Palace. The corals glowed in clusters and lit up the huge city at the bottom of the sea like lanterns. It was a gorgeous sight to behold. Boom! In the end, they engaged in an intense battle while Li Lin retreated while fighting. You want the Southern Sea Dragon race to attack me? Chu Feng frowned. They charged into the Southern Sea Dragon Palace and killed their way through, causing great chaos here. When the Southern Sea Elder Dragon King learned of the situation and rushed back from a certain oceanic trench, he flew into a rage and said, Chu Feng has gone too far. You dare charge into my dragon palace? I'll hack you into pieces sooner or later. He still didn't know about Chu Feng's accomplishments at Mount Putoa. Bang! After killing their way out of the Southern Sea Dragon Palace, Saintess Li Lin finally encountered danger. She was caught off guard by Chu Feng's diamond chakram as he closed in on her. She should be thankful that she had used up the essence flames of extreme yang within the diamond chakram. Swoosh! Chu Feng had snatched away the treasured pestle. Where do you think you're going, my maid? Chu Feng shouted and gave chase. Li Lin's expression was cold. She felt that the equality of all life domain would take too long to cool down. She suddenly turned around and fought with all her might. She was a saintess from a certain planet and possessed great talents. Just now, she had been avoiding the battle in hopes of exhausting the other party to death. Now, she was at a disadvantage. Could it be that she was inferior to this person in a battle of the same level? In truth, she was quickly dealt a blow. After exchanging blows with Chu Feng, she was at a slight disadvantage even as a saintess. Chapter 455. On the Blue Sea, Li Lin had suffered a great blow. She was the saintess of an ancient orthodoxy on a certain planet and the strongest of the younger generation. In the end, she had come to this declining planet and was suppressed by a native. She was so depressed that she wanted to cough up blood. They hadn't even exchanged 150 moves when Chu Feng slapped her on the left shoulder. The pain seeped into her bone marrow, and she fell into the sea with a plop, kicking up hundreds of sparkling waves. Chu Feng was astonished. Within the equality of all life domain, he circulated the thunderous breathing technique. His body was as tough and powerful as the Buddhist race's golden body. At the same time, his palm was infused with the demon flood dragon fist's spiraling ripping force. If it were anyone else, half of their body would have been severed. In a fierce battle, no one would be so stupid as to show mercy to the fairer sex. They would easily resort to decapitation moves. Thump! Waves dozens of meters high surged up. Li Lin's entire body was drenched, and her clothes were sticking to her body, outlining her curvaceous figure. As a saintess, not to mention strength, her looks alone were few and far between. If it were any other time, Chu Feng would definitely tease her, but now that it was a battle of life and death, he couldn't care less. The pair of energy wings on his back flapped and exploded with an ear-splitting sound as he swooped down to launch a fatal attack. Li Lin's snow-white body was covered in water droplets like a lotus flower emerging from the water. Her lustrous face was delicate, and water droplets flew out from her hair like hundreds of pearls sprinkling down. Thump! Thump! Her right hand trembled slightly, and a peach branch appeared in coordination with her breathing technique. The flower bud blossomed and surged with energy which swept toward Chu Feng. Apparently, the so-called peach blossom branch was a kind of energy body. The pink petals danced in the air, sparkling and translucent, but it was also intimidating. It emitted a vigorous power and left bloody marks on Chu Feng's fist amidst ripping sounds as it cut his arm. Chu Feng said with a solemn expression, "You've committed the peach blossom calamity." Li Lin was momentarily astonished. Seeing his serious expression, she thought something had really happened. But she quickly came to her senses and revealed a cold expression. This native clearly didn't know how to use the various energy forms. He was purposely spouting nonsense to distract her. The red spider lily, void, golden lotus, peach blossom calamity, and so on were all energy models. They could release even more powerful attacks. Next, a green lotus appeared behind Li Lin, as well as stars. Her strength had been pulled down, but she could still use some high-level techniques, causing trouble for Chu Feng. The green lotus swayed behind her, stars flickering about. Some of the stars actually fell down, smashing towards Chu Feng. Chu Feng was shocked out of his wits. Was this an energy star? A bang rang out as he dodged out of the way. The surface of the sea sank down, as if it had vanished into thin air. Then, with a bang, the sea exploded, and huge waves swept up into the sky. Dang! Chu Feng used the golden bell canopy of the 12 Xingyi true forms. A huge bell appeared outside his body, and a flood dragon and an ancient yak condensed within it. Golden mist surged between his nose and mouth as he pushed his breathing technique to the extreme. He directly charged forward and clashed with Li Lin, who was obviously in an extraordinary state. Dang, dang, dang. One after another, the stars fell down and smashed into the large bell, causing the energy here to explode. Chu Feng's heart was throbbing. He felt that he should enter the carefree realm as soon as possible and analyze the various energy models in order to outline his own path. Otherwise, he would be at a disadvantage in this kind of confrontation. The equality of all life domain was extremely bizarre. Although it could lower the opponent's strength, Li Lin still had all kinds of terrifying techniques. It could be predicted that without the Buddhist race's monastic robe, the falling stars would definitely be able to blast an evolver at the shackled realm or even the carefree realm into dregs. Li Lin was indeed worthy of being a saintess. Her methods were outstanding, and the abilities she had displayed were already enough to frighten Chu Feng. If she were at her peak and used all kinds of secret techniques, she would definitely be extraordinary. Buzz! It was as if the void had exploded and white mist surged. Chu Feng struck out with the diamond chakram in order to suppress and kill this woman. At this stage of the battle, he had no choice but to hold back. Li Lin wasn't an ordinary character. She dared to sever her own cultivation and cross over in advance. Her willpower was terrifying, and she was plotting something big. At this time, she was also displaying her viciousness. A bright silver chain flew out in an attempt to lock Chu Feng in place. The two actually launched a sneak attack at the same time. They had the same idea, and, as luck would have it, the two weapons collided and erupted with dazzling radiance. Clang! Li Lin was astonished. Her silver rope had dimmed from the impact. Were it not for its flexibility and deformability, it would have been shattered if it had been any other secret treasure. Our movements are as one. Is this the legendary telepathic connection? Chu Feng ridiculed and immediately used his spiritual arts to collect the diamond chakram. Li Lin's delicate brows rose slightly. The silver rope couldn't be used for the time being and needed to be nurtured for a period of time. It had almost been destroyed by the diamond chakram, but fortunately, it was flexible. The next moment, Saintess Li Lin was furious. That was because Chu Feng had taken out a glistening yellow pestle after putting away the diamond chakram and smashed it at her. This was her secret treasure, but it had fallen into the other party's hands. Bang, bang, bang. It was as if there was a meteor shower in this area. The energy stars above Li Lin's head smashed down continuously, causing the vast ocean to boil and almost evaporate. Chu Feng was extremely passive. In the end, the energy bell rang out incessantly and almost exploded. He held the diamond chakram in his hand and was ready to strike at any moment. However, Li Lin's body moved rapidly and was constantly on guard against him. She was incomparably apprehensive of that dazzling bracelet. At the same time, she kept on raining down the energy stars. This consumption was too great and couldn't be sustained for long. She clenched her teeth. If it were anyone else, even a Saint Child level expert, they would have long since been knocked down by her. But due to the existence of an abnormal domain like equality of all life, her strength was directly pulled down. Bang! Chu Feng found an opportunity. He activated the unstable energy bell and directly smashed it toward Li Lin. Li Lin cried out in alarm. She felt a terrifying energy pervading the air, and the few stars above her head were quickly shaken down and bombarded forward. Boom! A great explosion took place in this area. The two were sent flying amidst the energy radiance and were both coughing up blood. Both of them were injured. I must enter the carefree realm as soon as possible. Chu Feng's heart was filled with incomparable desire. If he could evolve to a higher level and grasp those methods, he wouldn't be in such a sorry state. Li Lin was greatly affected. She had used all her methods, but in the end, she still couldn't kill that native. It was likely that her injuries were even more serious. At this moment, she was like a golden snake swimming on the surface of the sea. She charged toward Chu Feng and fought him in close combat with her incomparably flexible body. Ouch! Chu Feng cried out. This woman's body was too flexible. She bent at an impossible angle and gave him a whipping kick. He grimaced in pain and felt a sharp pain in his left kidney. Li Lin was the strongest disciple of an ancient orthodoxy. As a saintess, she naturally grasped many secret techniques, and this golden snake art was one of them. She believed that Chu Feng's diamond chakram and her stolen treasure pestle were too great of a threat. As such, she found an opportunity to rush forward and kill Chu Feng in a small area. Clank! Bang! Sparks flew in all directions during this process. They were also activating their secret weapons, such as flying swords, to collide fiercely. At the same time, the two were already trembling together. Li Lin's arms and waist were terrifyingly flexible. She constantly attacked Chu Feng from inconceivable angles and finally bound him like a spirit-binding rope. Be more reserved. You're actually using force against me. Chu Feng cried out strangely. Upon hearing this, Li Lin's eyes became cold and murderous. Indeed, after using the golden snake art, she couldn't avoid entangling her limbs. This was a type of contortion technique that sometimes used the arms and legs to lock the opponent down. Under normal circumstances, she definitely wouldn't use this art. However, the situation was urgent and special. In order to cripple this native, she had no choice but to go all out. Hey, your long legs are about to snap my old waist, Chu Feng cried out strangely. His words were incomparably ambiguous. Of course, the situation was more or less the same. Li Lin was like a beautiful golden snake. Her waist was slender and soft, and her legs were long and powerful. She used her legs to lock onto Chu Feng's waist from behind while her arms strangled his neck in an attempt to break it. The two sides could feel the warmth of each other's bodies. Those who didn't understand the situation might think it was a romantic scene and mistake it for an intimate couple. However, the truth was that Chu Feng's tongue was about to fall out and his neck was almost broken by the pair of lotus-like arms. At the same time, he felt a sharp pain between his eyebrows. He had suffered a spiritual attack, and Li Lin wanted to destroy his spirit. Go to hell. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? Chu Feng shouted. With a boom, the thunderous breathing technique was activated. Golden light gushed out from all the pores on his body. He was like an indestructible golden body. His whole body was a dazzling golden color. Li Lin sneered. The other party's breathing technique was indeed terrifying and shocked her. However, she was once an expert of the visualization realm, so her experience and methods were superior. She was convinced that the other party's method was ineffective. So what if his physical body was as hard as the Zhang 6 golden body? She was currently using the golden snake contortion technique, which specialized in breaking hard techniques. Of course, it would be a different story if the other party was an evolver of the same level as her. At that time, that peerless breathing technique would display even more wondrous effects. Boom! However, just as she was brimming with confidence, the golden light around Chu Feng's body was withdrawn. He changed his breathing technique and used the mysterious technique Yellow Cattle had taught him. His body was immediately enveloped in a white mist and rapidly became flexible. He also used the Demon Flood Dragon Body technique, a technique contained within the Demon Flood Dragon Fist. The next moment, Chu Feng broke free like a flood dragon and turned around to attack Li Lin. He used his arms and legs to entangle this astonishingly powerful saintess. The waves overturned the sky as the two fell into the blue sea. They fought fiercely until they were completely entangled. Chu Feng whistled and did everything he could to suppress this woman. In the eyes of others, this was very ambiguous and could even be considered erotic. However, he wasn't in the mood to experience it. One careless mistake, and he might be strangled to death. He was certain that this woman had a great background and wasn't simple at all. The two's limbs were entangled as if they had become one person. A pair of snow-white, lotus-like arms tightly gripped the tower, Lord Chu Feng's neck. They were about to sink into his flesh, and she wanted nothing more than to wring it off immediately. Chu Feng spewed out sword chi from his nose and mouth. At the same time, his fiery eyes shot out beams of energy in an attempt to kill this woman. However, Li Lin wasn't only powerful in physical arts. She also understood profound spiritual arts. Not only did an energy barrier appear on the surface of her body to block the attack, but her spiritual power also rushed out and condensed into a shield. At the same time, She was also using her secret technique to kill Chu Feng. Waves struck the sky in the blue sea. Energy surged and gushed out from their pores. From afar, it looked like a beautiful golden snake and a flood dragon were entangled together. That was the result of an eruption of energy. Such a great commotion naturally alarmed many entities in the sea. A shark with 6 severed shackles said suspiciously, "The southern sea dragon race is starting to reproduce again." Another hawksbill turtle the size of small island appeared and said in a low, muffled voice, "The flood dragon race's reproduction is just as earth-shattering as their combat strength." Many entities appeared in this area. Although they couldn't see clearly from afar, they came to a consensus that the flood dragons were reproducing. Li Lin's divine instincts were extremely sharp and naturally heard everything. She was immediately flushed with anger and felt resentful. "You guys are right. This king's child is about to come into being." Chu Feng roared loudly and gasped for breath. Because his neck was about to break, his face was flushed red and his entire body was surging with energy. Then, he rammed his head into Li Lin's forehead. Why does it feel like a battle at the same time? Could this be the legendary love and hate entanglement? "Run! The flood dragons are reproducing. If you keep spying on us like this, you'll most likely be punished." The group of sea creatures fled without a trace and disappeared completely in the blink of an eye. At this time, Chu Feng had clearly gained the upper hand. That was because he was using the flood dragon technique. His head glowed with energy and dragon horns appeared. His attacks were incomparably tyrannical. The golden snake art was famous throughout the starry skies, but couldn't compare to the demon flood dragon physique. Thump, thump, thump. He rammed with all his might, his physical body surging with energy. The pair of terrifying flood dragon horns on his head broke through Li Lin's protective barrier and pierced through her spiritual shield. The collision caused her eyes to roll back, and she felt a sharp pain in her head as though it was about to be torn apart. In the end, she was knocked unconscious by Chu Feng and went limp. Her jade-like arms and snow-white legs loosened as she slid down from Chu Feng's body. "God damn it, I'm so tired." Chu Feng panted heavily as he swam through the blue sea with the beautiful serpent in his hand. Congratulations to the Dragon King for successfully reproducing. In the distance, a sea beast was sucking up to him. Saintess Li Lin was soaking in the seawater. The clothes on her tall and slender body were in tatters, revealing large areas of her snow-white skin. Even her special battle clothes had been torn in many places during the fierce battle. Chapter 456. Under the setting sun, waves crashed onto the small island, splashing sparkling waves everywhere. The island was very small and devoid of vegetation. It was full of rocks and uneven potholes. This place lacked vitality. Li Lin woke up and felt a splitting headache. She had been seriously injured during the final battle. That native had struck her head with all his might, and that pair of energy dragon horns had injured her greatly. Even now, her ears were still buzzing. Her ears were almost ringing, and she was seeing stars. She gently shook her head and regained some of her senses. She immediately felt that something was wrong and lay down on the ground. The ground was full of rocks, and her body was in pain. In that instant, Li Lin became much more clear-headed. Although her ears were still ringing and her vision was somewhat blurry, her spiritual senses were quickly recovering. Her body had been locked down. In particular, her hands, legs, and even her neck were bound by a silver metal chain. That was her secret treasure, a silver spiritual chain, but now it was being used to restrain her. Following which, Li Lin felt a warmth at her waist and completely recovered her senses. Her hair immediately stood on end, and a layer of goosebumps appeared on her body. She almost screamed and flipped out. However, she managed to restrain herself and looked back with difficulty. Sure enough, her premonition wasn't wrong. It was just as she had felt. That native was sitting on her lower back. Was he using her as a stool or a cushion? There were potholes everywhere on this small island full of crushed rocks. There really wasn't a good place to rest. But how could it be like this? The glorious saintess, number one among the younger generation of the most powerful orthodoxy on a certain planet, had been reduced to a cushion and a stool. She had been sat on by someone. The most hateful thing was that the native was deep in thought. He seemed to be thinking about something and was completely engrossed in it. She couldn't help but want to attack. The silver rope wrapped around her body immediately shone and directly bound her, making it impossible for her to struggle free. Especially when she used her spiritual power, the space between her brows was in great pain and almost split open. Bang! At this time, the native didn't even turn his head and was still thinking about something. However, he held a treasured pestle in his hand and struck the back of her head with it. His movements were skillful and natural. Lilin's eyes rolled back, and she fainted once again. Before fainting, she was extremely ashamed and resentful of this native. Just what had she experienced? The saintess of a generation was actually so miserable. When she woke up again, the sky was already full of moonlight, and the sea was sparkling. The waves hit the edge of the small island that was full of gravel from time to time. She found that she was still lying on the ground, but a few meters away from her original position. But it still made her feel ashamed and angry. She was still being used as a stool, and this time, it was even worse than the last time. It was obvious that the native had also changed his position after sitting for a long time. He placed her on a relatively protruding rock, which made her stomach hurt. This made it convenient for the native to use her as a stool. Chu Feng rested his chin on his hand as he sat there, studying something. His expression, coupled with his disdain for her, made Li Lin's lungs explode. It was unbearable. If you dare attack me again, you will continue to suffer, Chu Feng said without turning his head. He had a sea map in his hand, and he was studying it. In front of him was a 5-colored ship that was about a foot long. At the same time, there were a lot of things on the ground. Killing intent appeared in Li Lin's eyes when she saw this. Apart from that ship, everything else originally belonged to her, but now it had changed owners. At the same time, she felt scared. Those things, such as the secret gold necklace, were all intimately in contact with her body, but they had also been taken away. Get up. Li Lin restrained the anger in her chest and didn't erupt. She tried to make her voice as calm and gentle as possible. Don't disturb me, Chu Feng replied. In the end, he picked up her glistening yellow treasured pestle and smashed her again. Divine splendor blossomed, and Li Lin's eyes rolled back as she fainted once again. The last thought in front of her was that she wanted to curse. Even with her powerful willpower and endurance, she still couldn't bear it. She really wanted to curse. This man was too shameful. He used her as a cushion to sit on, and he was still so rough. He didn't even give her a chance to speak and smashed the back of her head with her treasured pestle at every turn. Early in the morning, the bright red sun leapt out of the sea. The divine morning glow sprinkled down on the blue sea, creating an extremely splendid scene. Li Lin opened her eyes once again. The pain at the back of her head couldn't be any worse. She had been smashed twice in succession by the most powerful weapon she had brought, the treasured pestle. That feeling was truly unbearable. The morning glow fell on her body, making her feel very warm. However, her heart was filled with misery. She had never felt so unlucky and miserable before. She really wanted to end her own life. But how could she be willing? She wanted revenge. That bastard had switched her position again, but he was still using her as a stool and sitting on her. She felt that she was probably the most miserable saintess in history. Even an ordinary disciple of her orthodoxy was the center of attention in the outside world, let alone the number one disciple of the direct line of descent. In the future, she would inherit a powerful holy land and become the strongest on a planet. It was rare that Li Lin didn't say anything this time. She didn't want to be smashed unconscious by that bastard again. At this time, she only quietly tilted her head and watched. At the same time, she was very careful and didn't dare to make too big of a movement. Li Lin completely recognized that the multicolored ship glowing amidst the morning glow should be the treasured ship of the Penglai Immortal Island. Yesterday, Chen Sheng, Chen Pu, and the others had driven it to the seaside outside of Mount Putoa. She guessed that this shameless Demon King Chu had rushed to Mount Putoa to steal the multicolored ship after capturing her yesterday. In truth, this was indeed the case. Chu Feng had forgotten about the ship while chasing after Li Lin. He only remembered it after he was done with his business. He quietly rushed back and found that no one had touched the ship. It seemed they didn't want to incur any enmity with Penglai. Then he decisively stole it. At present, the ship had shrunk to a foot in length and was still flowing with multicolored light. Last night, Chu Feng spent most of his time studying this ship. It was actually capable of teleportation. It was simply too advanced. But, judging from its flickering multicolored light, it was an antique that had probably been excavated from some ruins not too long ago. Many parts of its interior were emitting an aura of decay. If he wanted to use it for a longer period of time, he would have to undergo a major repair. Chu Feng had no intention of doing so. He wasn't a master refiner and didn't have a means to do so. He could only refine it the next time he entered the revered 8 trigrams furnace and see if it could be repaired. "You're awake." Chu Feng tilted his head and looked at her. "Don't shout, don't scream. Cooperate a bit, and I promise you won't faint again." Li Lin felt that these words were very awkward, and she was so angry that the roots of her teeth were itching. At this time, Chu Feng stood up and stretched lazily while facing the sun. He seemed quite at ease. Meanwhile, Li Lin's face was full of black lines. She really wanted to curse. Her waist was about to break from the sitting. It was numb and slightly painful. "Let's bask in the sun." Chu Feng pulled her up and made her sit there facing the morning glow with a kind expression. But Li Lin wanted to beat him up and kill him. That was because her cultivation had been sealed and she was bound by the silver chains. Her body was powerless but was sitting on a very irregular rock. It was very uncomfortable. This island was like this. There were no regular rocks. Otherwise, Chu Feng wouldn't have used her as a cushion and a stool. He didn't have the heart to be tender toward this beautiful and powerful captive. He was only making use of her effectively and reasonably. Li Lin saw that there was a black bracelet on Chu Feng's hand. It was made of spatial stone and originally belonged to her. But now, she could only watch helplessly. All of her things had changed owners. There were some messy things on the ground, such as long skirts and undergarments. It made her want to flip out. It was obvious that these private things were dug out by Chu Feng. He didn't want them and threw them in front of her. "I'll return them to you." Chu Feng smiled. At the same time, he asked suspiciously, "The space inside your bracelet isn't that big. Moreover, as a saintess, you don't have many secret treasures. Are you really the most powerful inheritor of a certain orthodoxy?" Li Lin's heart was dripping blood after hearing this. It was too painful. She had suffered greatly after being captured. She didn't want to pay attention to this person and didn't want to explain. How many people could bring so many secret treasures? All of them were destroyed during the border crossing. At this time, Li Lin lowered her head and noticed her own situation. In the end, she couldn't help but cry out. She was a bit angry because her clothes were in tatters and many parts of her pure white skin were exposed. What did you do to me?" Any woman's first reaction would be to panic. "I did everything," Chu Feng replied calmly. You. Li Lin's beautiful face turned pale. However, she wasn't an ordinary person after all. She immediately forced herself to calm down and carefully sensed her surroundings. At the same time, she thought about how this bastard had used her as a stool yesterday to study the multicolored ship, the things on her body, and the magnetic stones. He had sat there for the whole night and was incomparably engrossed. He had no time to mess around with her. At this time, she wanted to get up and not sit like this. However, it was impossible. She was bound by her own silver metal chains and couldn't move. "Something's wrong. There's something in my body. What is it?" Her expression suddenly changed and turned pale. I pondered for most of the night and used a domain researcher's method to insert several magnetic crystal needles inscribed with many runes into your body. Amen. It's best if you don't use the power of the carefree realm in the future. Otherwise, they'll explode and you'll turn into a bloody mess, Chu Feng informed her. This was like a bolt from the blue to Li Lin. Her cultivation had been restricted. Chu Feng warned, only I can remove those magnetic domain needles. Don't touch them carelessly. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that you won't break your arms or legs. Li Lin's beautiful countenance lost all color. She had severed her cultivation with her powerful willpower and crossed over in advance just to suffer. Don't worry, my evolution speed is very fast. As the saying goes, a rising tide lifts the boat. You'll recover very soon. I need a powerful saint as follower. Chu Feng was all smiles. What else did you do to me? Li Lin's mental endurance was quite strong. She quickly calmed down. I helped you take a set of photos. They're sexy, enchanting, and so beautiful that it's worth treasuring. You, Li Lin erupted. She didn't care about anything else, but after learning about this, she was shocked, angry, and afraid. She cursed repeatedly. Chu Feng was speechless. He had only said it casually and didn't have the time to fiddle with those things. Last night, studying the seal of domain suppression was quite exhausting. This woman's reaction was too big. He finally understood that saintesses were sometimes no different from ordinary women. Now, Li Lin's emotions were in a complete mess, and she wanted to fight it out with him. Don't worry. Just be a good maid for me and add incense to my sleeves. I promise to delete all those photos in the future. You'll still be the saintess. Chu Feng casually said. He suddenly understood that the so-called saintess had to be flawless. If something bad were to happen to her, she would most likely be unable to be the saintess when she returned to the Holy Land. That was why she was so agitated. Don't think about dealing with me. I've encrypted the photo albums. If anything happens to me, those things will automatically be sent to the entire world after a certain amount of time. Chu Feng tricked her. He really hadn't done any bad things, but he spoke as if he had. The most important thing was that Li Lin didn't care about anything, but she was too concerned about these things. Even if she was very suspicious, she still treated it seriously. She was warning Chu Feng that if something really happened, she would fight it out with him even if she had to die. Is there a need to go so far? Haven't you seen our planet? Which celebrity doesn't take some photos and is embarrassed to go out and greet people? It's reasonable to say that you're the biggest celebrity on your planet. It's too bitter to live such a conservative life. Besides, it's really backward. Your planet is too primitive and uncivilized. Chu Feng shook his head with a sense of superiority. Li Lin clenched her teeth and said, Our planet has been connected to the interstellar network for who knows how many tens of thousands of years. Her planet could be considered a high-grade planet with a highly prosperous and developed evolutionary civilization. Although technology was only supplementary, she felt that it was far superior to this place. Now, she couldn't accept being looked down upon by the natives of this declining planet for being a barbaric planet. Very well. Saintess from a high-grade planet, my maid. Let's be on our way. Chu Feng called out to her and untied the silver metal rope. I'm warning you. Don't think about dealing with me. Otherwise, the magnetic needles in your body will explode. At that time, it will be very miserable. Chu Feng warned once again. With such a powerful maid by his side, he decided to make full use of her power to do some big things. Otherwise, it would be too much of a waste. Li Lin's complexion alternated between green and white. She really wanted to slap this native to death, but she didn't dare act rashly. She indeed felt that there was something in her body and was worried that it would explode. The next moment, Chu Feng commanded Li Lin to drive the multicolored ship. They performed a spatial jump and appeared in the Eastern Sea. He leisurely reclined on the rocking chair and didn't waste any energy. He let Li Lin operate the ship. Not only was he using her as a maid, but he was also using her as a laborer. According to the sea map on the multicolored ship, Peng Lai should be in this sea region. Search carefully. They really found it after half a day. It was an extremely large island enshrouded in white mist. It was very hazy and ordinary people couldn't approach it. Today, we found the right place. Next time you come, "You'll bring disaster to this place," said Chu Feng. Li Lin was originally expressionless and didn't want to pay attention to him. But now, she couldn't help but roll her eyes. Afterward, Chu Feng decisively launched a sneak attack. He used the treasured pestle to knock her out and imprison her once again. Before Li Lin fainted, she was exceptionally shocked and angry. She was really the most miserable saintess in history. At the same time, she realized that this bastard definitely had some secret he didn't want her to know. Next, Chu Feng didn't stop to rest. He took out the stone he had brought out from Mount Eternal and sensed it seriously. Then, he quickly rushed over. He ascended an island where yellow cattle, Ouyang Feng, and the toad had disappeared. He had come again. He missed them very much and had come to take a look. "They can come out." Chu Feng was shocked because he had discovered words. He had come here once last time and left a message for them. Now, he discovered that there was actually a response and carvings left behind. At the same time, the outside world was in an uproar. It was simply turning the world upside down. During the battle at Mount Putois, Chu Feng had swept away his enemies and killed a large number of people. Moreover, he had even chased after Saintess Li Lin at the final juncture. According to the feedback from some of the Southern Seas royalty, Saintess Li Lin should really have fallen into his trap and been captured alive. This was simply explosive news that shook every part of the world. Moreover, the star passages behind the famed mountains were in a state of chaos. Chu Feng had already endangered a Saintess-level evolver. In truth, the situation was far more serious than people had thought. It wasn't just Earth that was shaken, but even the outer realms were alarmed. After the major incident yesterday, someone specially leaked the news to the outer realms and alarmed the saints. That was because, during the battle at Mount Putois, one of the people Chu Feng had swept away was the younger brother of a certain saint. He was a direct descendant of a certain saint. Their bloodline was too small, and their bloodline inheritance was about to be severed. That overprotective saint immediately attacked after hearing this. Additionally, Li Lin had been captured. She was the saintess of the most powerful orthodoxy on a certain high-ranking planet. This matter also alarmed the relevant experts in the starry skies. In the outer realms, many experts were paying attention to Earth and listening to the reports from time to time. This was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. The Nining Sparrow's head was drenched in cold sweat. He knew that he had issued a decree to kill Chu Feng and use the saint's bronze seal as a lure. In the end, he had provoked a great deal of trouble. He had invited his sworn brother, the 100 Transformations Saint Yuan Changkong, who had also arrived outside of Earth. Chapter 457. There was a lack of vitality on the island. Even if there were trees, they were decaying. Even if there were living beings moving, they were also decaying. Their eyes were lifeless and wouldn't move for a long time. Chu Feng was excited. Yellow cattle, the black yak, and the old donkey had left messages for him, informing him that they were still alive and would return sooner or later. 7 large mountains were shrouded in clouds and mist. This was Mount Eternal. It was silent and somewhat terrifying. Chu Feng smiled outside the mountain gate. A large stone had been lifted from his heart. He had always been worried about their safety and was afraid that they would die inside. Now, he was slightly relieved. However, he could tell from the messages that it was very dangerous inside Mount Eternal. Currently, only yellow cattle and Ouyang Feng had gone deep inside. The others were on the periphery and didn't dare to step into the danger zone. To everyone, the depths of Mount Eternal was a forbidden zone. Ordinary living beings would become living dead if they entered. Chu Feng looked around. There were many living dead outside the mountain gate. Nearby, there were rocks accompanied by decaying ancient trees. There were many humanoid creatures, but they were all skin and bones. The eye sockets of the skeleton of an unknown divine bird flickered with ghostly flames. There were also fist-sized ants, 10-meter-long grasshoppers, and so on. There were all kinds of living beings. Unfortunately, although they weren't destroyed, their divine souls had withered. These were all living dead who had once entered deep into Mount Eternal to challenge the checkpoints. They wanted to rise up and become demonic sages, but how many of them had succeeded in countless years? Millions of geniuses had turned into decaying monsters. One had to know that those who were chosen to enter Mount Eternal were mostly heaven-bestowed geniuses. In the end, they rotted and were imprisoned here forever. They became a member of the army of the dead, waiting to be summoned. One day, they might kill their way out and train on Earth. Chu Feng saw Yellow Cattle's message. He was looking forward to their reunion and was also shocked. According to what Yellow Ox had said, it would be very difficult for him to come out, and he could only walk to the mountain gate area. However, according to the clues he had seen in the Deadland, he speculated that the entire Earth might become his training ground. This planet had been chosen by Mount Eternal to temper the few of them. At that time, it would be able to come out and meet Chu Feng. There was no need to think too much. When Yellow Cattle and Ouyang Feng reappeared, their combat strength would certainly be astonishing. That was because this was a place to nurture demonic sages. They didn't need mediocre people, nor did they need decent geniuses. They only needed the strongest to be honed through death. Otherwise, they would become the living dead and be imprisoned here forever. Yellow Cattle, you must live, Chu Feng said. Then, he paused for a moment to carve a message here. Before Chu Feng left, he chose a few places on the island and began to hide things. For instance, the 3 seeds in the stone box and the silver box he had obtained from the broken energy pagoda at Mount Qinling, which he had been unable to open all along. These were the most important things to him, but he couldn't use them for the time being. He didn't want to keep them on him, fearing that they would be exposed or stolen. This was especially true since Yang Xian, Hu Qingcheng, and Qinglan possessed the heaven's I Dao fruit. They could actually spy on his every move, so he was afraid of a leak. Only a supreme holy land of the demonic race like Mount Eternal, as well as a secret land with exceptionally terrifying domains, could isolate the heaven's eye and prevent it from being spied on. Chu Feng clearly knew that he looked dazzling, glorious in battle achievements, and a beautiful race, but he was actually facing a great danger. If a few high-level divine sons, saintesses, or old monsters were to successfully escape from Penglai, what awaited him might be a desperate situation of life and death. As such, he had to be prepared. If he were to unfortunately die, he had to ensure that a few heaven-defying items fell into the hands of Yellow Cattle and the others. He had been singing triumphantly recently and seemed optimistic, but in fact, Chu Feng had long since prepared for the worst. In the end, he walked out of the island. Chu Feng still didn't know that there were demonic sages approaching from the outer realms, but he felt uneasy. This was an instinctive intuition. However, a small number of people on Earth had already learned that demonic sages were approaching. They were driving an ancient chariot that had been covered in dust for countless years, crushing through the starry skies and entering the solar system. Nowadays, there were many descenders on Earth. Naturally, there were eyes and ears from the outer realms who regularly transmitted information to the starry skies. They were the ones who had reported this to a certain demonic sages. A dusty stone chariot appeared at the edge of the solar system. Even the rolling wheels were made of stone, and the entire body was suffused with primal chaos. The starry skies trembled along the way. It wasn't very big. Compared to the boundless cosmos, it was as small as a speck of dust and insignificant even within the solar system. But now, the aura it was emitting was actually causing this area to tremble slightly and the stars to seem as if they were about to explode. It possessed a mysterious power capable of suppressing the sea of stars. An old horse was also dusty and covered in mottled fur. There was no light to speak of, but it was pulling this ancient chariot that hadn't appeared in the world for who knew how many eras. There were traces of cracks on the stone chariot caused by axes, sabers, and arrows. They were all left behind by the demonic sages of the past, and most of them were already dead. So much so that there were bloodstains on the broken stone chariot. Some were dark red, some had a faint golden luster, and some were silvery white. Even though the blood had long since dried up, they were still glowing and emitting the might of a demonic sages. The enemy's blood was still there. From this stone chariot, it was enough to prove how powerful the person who had come was. He had killed the demonic sages and was an existence that could slaughter them. He himself was a well-known figure at this level. Ancient Saint Junta was an ancient demonic sage who had experienced all the battles of the endless years. He had experienced the destruction of the origin beasts, the black blood tide, the darkening of the heavens, and many other terrifying eras. He had survived all of them until now. He had drunk the demonic sage's blood and torn apart the golden bodhisattva without being destroyed by the Buddhist race. In the end, his crimes were pardoned. It could be said that his life was incomparably glorious. It was precisely such a person who had come and approached Earth to take action for his descendants. Perhaps it was because he had killed too many people and his achievements were too dazzling. He was an expert even among the demonic sages. As a result, his race had encountered all kinds of unexpected disasters. This race was originally sparse in numbers, and now they were almost extinct. Moreover, their reproduction rate was abnormally low. Their race was a quasi-divine beast, so it was impossible for them to reproduce in large numbers. Their clansmen could be counted. The star-core turtle, as the name implied, was bred in the core of a star and was very difficult to hatch. Presently, there were only a few pure-blooded ones. Moreover, as they advanced in age, their strength became increasingly terrifying, but their reproduction rate was declining exponentially. It wasn't only the star-core turtles, but the other races were also like this. The more powerful they were, the more difficult it was to reproduce. Most of the heirs were left behind by the strongest experts of each race when they were young. At present, there was not a single young member of the star-core turtle lineage. There were a few mixed bloods, and now 2 of them had stepped onto the star passages and arrived on Earth. One was called the Silver Divine Child, and the other was the Silver Divine Child's younger brother, Enhong. During the Battle of Mount Putah, Enhong had knocked into Chu Feng until he vomited blood. In the end, he was captured by Chu Feng's multicolored net and was prepared to be eaten when he entered the carefree realm. Both the Silver Divine Child and Enhong didn't know that they were the descendants of the ancient Saint Junta. Otherwise, their prestige would be even greater. That was because the ancient Saint Junta had previously looked down on mixed bloods and believed that they weren't of the orthodox bloodline. But recently, an old star-core turtle had reported to him that almost all of his clansmen had advanced in age. Their strength had become increasingly profound, but they had almost all lost their fertility. At this moment, Jun Tuo's heart was greatly shaken. He immediately made the Tao children at his side contact all over the starry skies to search for mixed bloods. The identities of the Silver Divine Child and Enhong brothers were naturally reported at the first possible moment. Junta didn't make it public, and instead asked those descenders on Earth who were willing to pass on information to pay close attention and report to his Tao children at any time. As such, Junta was furious when he learned that Enhong had been captured and that the native had threatened to eat him. His heart, which had been silent for a long time, was stirred. Who was he? He was an ancient saint who had experienced endless years and conquered the heavens. It was unknown just how many vital planets he had destroyed. Yet, someone dared to use his descendants as food? As far as he was concerned, his entire clan should be exterminated. He believed that his descendants could die in battle, but they absolutely couldn't be used as food, especially since he had once conquered this planet. Back then, he was a member of the Saints' main force and absolutely couldn't be compared to the Heavenly Knights. He had participated in the massacre and had even slaughtered a saint on this planet. Now, the native of this declining planet wanted to use his descendants as food. He absolutely couldn't tolerate this. Jun Tuo had arrived on his ancient war chariot. He had been seriously injured ever since the ancient battle where he had destroyed the main force on this planet. He had never used this war chariot again, but now that he was revisiting this place, he was once again driving the stone chariot and displaying a terrifying suppressive might. Along the way, Neptune, Jupiter, and Mars all seemed to be trembling. The scene was terrifying. As for those battleships in the solar system, they were all frozen and fixed in the starry skies. Some of them didn't know what was going on and wanted to move at full power. In the end, they disintegrated in an instant and turned into cosmic dust. The old horse pulled the stone chariot and arrived outside of Earth. The ancient Saint Jun-Tuo was silent within the chariot. There was a pair of Tao children on the shaft. At this moment, they jumped down and stood beside the chariot in silence. In outer space, Yang Xian, Hu Qingcheng, and Qing Lan felt as though the sky was falling and the earth was splitting apart when they faced the chariot. They saw the chariot wrapped in primal chaos and what seemed like sacred blood splashing out. Some vital planets exploded and golden bodhisattvas were torn into two halves. The scene was too terrifying. The three collapsed on the spot. Their bodies involuntarily knelt down and prostrated themselves in worship. They knew that this was the terrifying accomplishments of an ancient saint. It was something that had happened in the past and made people tremble in fear. He could easily slaughter a planet, following which a faint gaze swept over them through the primal chaos. The three of them could no longer think as their thoughts froze. Moreover, everything in their minds was no longer secret and had been seen through by this ancient saint. In the end, when they felt alive again, their minds were filled with scenes of Chu Feng. They knew the saint was examining everything about Chu Feng. In the blink of an eye, two more entities arrived from outer space. One of them was the quasi-sage 9 Een Sparrow whose strength had fallen sharply. It was no longer as cruel and ruthless as before in front of this ancient saint and only saluted him in silence. Additionally, he had come with another person wrapped in primal chaos. He paid his respects to Jun-Tuo in the stone chariot and then sat down cross-legged at the side. He was the 100 transformations Saint Yuan Chunkong. Pass on the saint's decree. Chu Feng must die. At this time, a Tao child spoke. He looked young and tender, but the vicissitudes in his eyes betrayed his actual age. This was an existence no weaker than a golden arhut. On earth, it was as though thunder had filled the sky and lightning had danced in the 9 heavens. The sound was grand and shook every region. Chapter 458. From the Eastern Hemisphere to the Western Hemisphere, from the North Sea to the South Sea, all creatures were shaken. That was because the decree had resounded throughout the world. The voice was somewhat tender, but it was cold and tyrannical. How much trouble has Chu Feng caused this time? Lu Tong, who had just left the hollow jade temple, looked up at the sky with a face full of worry. He knew the problem was big this time. Among the famed mountains, within the folded spaces, and on the star passages, the entities from different galaxies were all shaken. They had long since sensed it, but they hadn't expected it to actually happen. This time, it's not the quasi-sage 9 Een Sparrow, but a true ancient saint. He's truly terrifying. Although Jun-Tuo went into seclusion after the ancient war, his name is still being spread throughout the starry skies. A saint child who understood the inside story was shaken and couldn't help but sigh. Before the incident, he had already received reports from other descenders that Jun-Tuo would come. Brother Chu Feng is in trouble. This time, a true saint has come to attack. What can we do? How can we get through this crisis? Within Tibet, the bald horse king spoke with a frown and a worried expression. The old Lama, the mastiff king, and the other great demons of Mount Kunlun were all present. All of them were frowning deeply. They had learned from a descender that last time, it was only the quasi-sage 9 Een Sparrow who wanted to kill Chu Feng. This time, however, it was a true ancient saint. The two couldn't be discussed in the same breath. Additionally, this Jun-Tuo was too powerful. He had issued an edict for Chu Feng's death as soon as he arrived on Earth. He didn't even let others take action. At that level, his abilities were exceedingly high. Even if he couldn't enter Earth, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill someone. This made them feel uneasy and afraid that Chu Feng would die. Fortunately, our final choice was correct. We didn't get too close to the native heavens chosen. This person is destined to die early. An expert from the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave spoke. There were also experts here who had severed their own cultivation to enter this world. After cultivating for 22 years, they had gradually recovered. Princess Lin and the other sighed after hearing this. This time, a true saint had arrived. How could Chu Feng escape this calamity? In the depths of Mount Lao, the Prince of Great Qi reappeared. He had an imposing appearance, but the depths of his eyes were cold and suffused with killing intent. Qi Yu was a genius of an Evolver dynasty and had a noble status. Previously, all the troops he had brought along had been annihilated. Therefore, he had boundless killing intent towards Linoi and Chu Feng. What a pity! I still wanted to do it myself. It seems like I won't be able to wait for that day. He was very regretful that he still couldn't leave the folded space. My ancestor has also come. On Mount Lu, the 100 transformations, Saint Child Yuan Feng frowned. He was very uneasy. He had once suffered a great loss at the hands of Chu Feng, and even now, he hadn't personally slaughtered that native. His prestige had suffered greatly recently. He was a little worried. What would the saints of the clan think? There were quite a few people in their clan, and the competition was fierce. There were quite a few people who were eyeing his position as the Holy Son, unlike Jun Tuo's bloodline, which was almost going extinct. The entire world was in chaos. Even the ordinary people heard the decree, and they were all deeply shaken. On Mount Putoa, Jiang Luoshen was calling Chu Feng's communicator. Unfortunately, she couldn't get through to him no matter how many times she tried. At this juncture, no one could find Chu Feng because he had yet to leave the sea region near Mount Eternal. There was a strong magnetic interference and a mysterious domain there that even the clairvoyant couldn't see through. In outer space, it was as if thunder had blossomed as a blazing beam of light was emitted. It was a Tao child using a secret technique. He held a treasured mirror in his hand and shone it toward Earth. The surface of the mirror had long since outlined Chu Feng's appearance. It was investigating his whereabouts in order to find him. The Tao child frowned, and his eyes, which were full of vicissitudes of life, became abstruse. He couldn't find Chu Feng from beginning to end, and there was no reaction from the mirror. According to reason, the person it was looking for would have nowhere to hide once the sky inspecting treasured mirror appeared. The mirror should have sensed him immediately. Could it be that he has a precious treasure on him that can resist the treasured mirror's probing? He revealed a doubtful expression. After leaving Mount Eternal, Chu Feng entered the sea. The fog in this area was very dense, and the outside world still couldn't detect him. He took out the foot-long multicolored ship and placed it on the surface of the sea. In a split second, it expanded dramatically and became extremely huge. At this time, he shook Saintess Li Lin awake and said, "Set sail." After Li Lin woke up, she couldn't help but be filled with anger, even though her willpower and tenacity were astonishing. She wanted to fight it out with him. He knocked her out again and again. Not even a servant girl would be so miserable, let alone a saintess. This matter is urgent, so it won't happen again. I'll return you half of the photo album after a while, Chu Feng said calmly. It was very effective to talk about something that didn't exist. Li Lin restrained her emotions. As the strongest descendant of a planet, her self-control was very strong. Especially when she saw that simple and unadorned jade table. Her gloomy mood was somewhat relieved. One of the table legs was missing, and now a silver tortoise was pressed under it as a stepping stone to support the table. Li Lin was dumbfounded. He didn't take the Outer Realm geniuses seriously at all. That was the brother of the Silver Divine Sun, yet he was actually being used as a stepping stone under the table. Silver tortoise, behave yourself. The table isn't stable even if you want to read. If you dare move recklessly again, I'll detonate all the magnetic needles in your body. Chu Feng threatened. At this moment, the silver tortoise was trembling. It was too goddamn sullen. A dignified Divine Sun's brother was being humiliated like this. Its eyes revealed an ominous glint, and it really wanted to fight it out with him. Chu Feng lowered his head and shot a glance. You brought this upon yourself. If you hadn't wanted to cut off my head, how would this have happened? If you want to kill me, then you must be prepared to be captured. You should be glad that you're still alive and the others are dead. Native of a savage planet, descendant of a failure with mottled bloodlines. The silver tortoise howled in its heart. It was truly furious, but it didn't dare to act out. It still didn't know that it was June 2's descendant. If it did, then its aura would be even more different. Chu Feng saw this tortoise in a new light. He decided to treat it as food purely because it was a spirit tortoise and felt that it was a great supplement. Finally, they gradually left this sea region. When they looked back, Mount Eternal had disappeared. The supreme secret land, used to nurture demonic sages, could change its position at any time. Only those with Mount Eternal's rocks could sense it and slowly find it. I found it. It's in the ocean. At this moment, the Tao child beside the extraterrestrial stone chariot revealed a delighted expression as he reported to the Saint June Ta. At this time, another person arrived from the outer realm. It was a dark-faced, burly man with an iron sword on his back. He stepped through the starry skies and rushed from the edge of the solar system to Earth. It was extremely terrifying as he strode forward. The surrounding starry skies trembled slightly. Without a doubt, this was a saint who had revealed his true face and wasn't shrouded in primal chaos. Greetings, Saint Duanmu. The nine Een Sparrow spoke. Although he was a quasi-saint, his status here wasn't enough. He had to lower his head when facing three true saints, let alone now that he was crippled. Amen. Duanmu nodded. With the three saints present, the outer realm was suffused with holy qi. This area was completely different now. Even the earth was beginning to show patterns and domains were recovering. At this time, there was a stable wormhole at the edge of the solar system. Not only was there a constellation vine growing there, but there was also a void lotus. It was swaying and emitting biological signals. This was the coverage of the interstellar network being further strengthened. At the same time, a star tree flew over not far from Earth. It took root in the void and wasn't very tall. It emitted light and emitted biological electromagnetic signals to strengthen the interstellar network. Many people in the starry skies were paying attention to Earth, and there was no lack of saints among them. Hence, the interstellar network had completely covered the solar system. One could see something from the reactions of Jun Tua, Yuan Shinkong, and Duanmu. They didn't stop them. Apparently, the background of the interstellar network was unfathomable. Otherwise, ordinary people would have been annihilated with a single finger if they dared to spy on it. In the depths of the starry skies, many people on vital planets received the news. Extra, extra! The saints have taken action, detonated the starry skies, and shocked the sea of stars. Exclusive report, live broadcast. They're the live broadcast on the Origin Beast platform. The three saints have arrived in person to kill a native in the wasteland. This will shake the sea of stars. Don't miss it. Not to mention other things. Just the saints taking action would definitely shake the starry skies. Such characters were like true dragons in the primal chaos. It was difficult for ordinary people to see them, let alone watch them fight. In a split second, many places in the major galaxies were boiling. The galaxy where the three saints have descended isn't an ordinary place. In ancient times, it was ranked 11th in the entire cosmos and was once so resplendent that it could be mentioned in the same breath as the top 10. A commentator sighed emotionally on the Origin Beast platform. However, he quickly shut up because he had been warned that he could continue speaking if he wanted to die. Many people knew about this matter, but couldn't be said in public. Many people watching the live broadcast knew the inside story and began to boo. This was only a small interlude and didn't count for much. People were even more expectant now. What kind of waves would the three saints cause when they descended once again? Moreover, many young people from various major galaxies had stepped onto the star passages and were rushing there. It was likely that it would be very exciting and many things had happened. At this time, regardless of whether it was the top experts of the older generation or the youths in their prime, they all received the news. They were all moved and immediately connected to the interstellar network to watch the live broadcast. Very soon, people learned that the ancient Saint Juntua was going to kill a native. This immediately caused a huge uproar. A person of such status was actually doing this for a descendant? Juntua is afraid that his bloodline will be severed. He's protecting his offspring like this for everyone to see. He's warning all parties not to harm his descendants. This old fellow is tyrannical and powerful. Back then, he stirred up a rain of blood and foul winds on that planet. This time, he most likely has a deeper meaning. Perhaps he wants to draw out the remnants. Oh, I also heard that the Ninine Sparrow caused a ruckus last time. There's someone supporting him from behind. Don't tell me it's Juntua. That was just a probe. Is he really going to make a move now? In the depths of the starry skies, even demonic sages and golden bodhisattvas were paying attention. Very soon, the name of the native Chu Feng spread through the starry skies. He hadn't even left the solar system, but people already knew of him. This was also a different kind of fame shaking the starry skies. I heard that many divine sons and saintesses have set off toward that planet. I really want to see how they're doing and whether they can advance by leaps and bounds there. Some youngsters paid even more attention. Their eyes were burning with eagerness as they wanted to understand the current situation of the saint-child level characters. Could it be that they've suffered a setback and are being suppressed by a native? Otherwise, why are there two other saints in addition to the Juntua saint arriving in person? Some of the youngsters' eyes flickered. They would be even happier if they could hear that fairies and divine sons had suffered a setback. This could also be considered a kind of deep-rooted bad habit. As such, many people were looking forward to it. Wow, those are the three saints. I can see them. They're covered in primal chaos. How terrifying. Sword Saint Duanmu's true appearance can be seen. For a moment, the depths of the starry skies were boiling. That was because many people had surged into the Origin Beast platform to officially watch the live broadcast. Outside of Earth, that Tao child was holding a treasured mirror in one hand and a saint talisman in the other. It was flowing with brilliant colors and overflowing with light. It was obvious at a glance that it was a peerless treasure. The Origin Beast platform's commentators were all experienced and knowledgeable people. Otherwise, how could they explain the major event of a saint taking action? They immediately drew in a breath of cold air after seeing the saint talisman. This is a secret treasure that has been irrigated with saint blood. Of course, it's not Juntuo's own blood, but rather the blood of a saint he had killed in the past. If this talisman is placed on Earth, it will not be tainted by karma and will not suffer the planet's backlash. As expected, that Tao child took action and threw out the saint talisman. It flew directly into the atmosphere and slashed toward a certain sea region on Earth. Boom! The heavens fell and the Earth cracked. The Earth's domains sensed it and immediately attacked with countless runes. At this moment, even the starry skies were trembling. The Saint Talisman was too powerful, and the domains on Earth were also abnormally terrifying. An intense collision occurred. Boom! In the end, dazzling rays of light fell upon the eastern sea like lightning from the nine heavens. It was exceptionally glaring. At the same time, the star tree outside of Earth shone. The interstellar network covered the eastern sea and captured everything clearly. The people from the outer realms finally saw what Chu Feng looked like. Chu Feng had just left Mount Eternal. He was lying comfortably on a rocking chair and letting Li Lin steer the multicolored ship. He was preparing to return to land and go to the altar on Mount Tai. It was at this moment that the sky was filled with blazing rays of light. They danced like lightning and fell toward him. Immediately, his hair stood on end. Have I been struck by lightning? He suddenly sat up and prepared to resist. Ever since he had opened the fiery eyes and advanced triumphantly, capturing the Saintess and causing the Saint children on the star passage to suffer losses, he had been worried whether he would be struck by lightning one day. Boom, boom, boom. Lightning danced and flashed. In the end, they were all destroyed above the ship and didn't really fall. The Earth's domains took effect and completely obliterated them. Chu Feng was lost in thought. It was also at this time that his communicator could receive normal messages after leaving the sea region of Mount Eternal. In a split second, it started to ring incessantly. Chu Feng checked and immediately felt a chill from head to toe. He understood the situation outside. A saint had arrived and wanted to kill him. He quickly looked up. Did this mean that it was the saints doing just now? Chu Feng's body was ice cold and his hair stood on end. The saint had personally attacked him. This was really thinking highly of him. But soon his eyes lit up. What was there to be afraid of? At worst, he would die. There was no use in lowering his head now. Since the saint had come, he definitely wouldn't change his mind. At the thought of this, Chu Feng looked up and pointed at the firmament. Which old turtle is sneak attacking me? In a split second, the starry sky was silent. Be it the three saints, the Ninine Sparrow, or the two Tao children, no one made a sound. Even the Interstellar Network and the Origin Beast platform were dead silent. The commentator was tongue-tied. He didn't dare comment or know what to say. That was because Jun Tuo's true form was a galactic turtle. It really was, but soon, the people watching the live broadcast on the Origin Beast platform were in an uproar. Although they revered the saints, what was there to be afraid of with the Interstellar Network between them? Some of the men roared with laughter, and there were even some women who were trembling with laughter. Doubtlessly, people had already remembered Chu Feng's name before he even stepped out of Earth. Outside Earth. I'll do it. At this time, the 100 Transformations Saint Yuan Chengkong spoke. He no longer let the Tao children beside the carriage take action. Instead, he was going to take action himself. During this process, the ancient Saint Jun Tuo sat on the chariot and didn't move. He had no intention of taking action himself. Yuan Chengkong's fingers split open and a drop of tricolored blood rolled down. It was incomparably divine and surged with auspicious clouds. Now, it had transformed into a sword and disappeared into the Earth's atmosphere with a swoosh. Only at this time did the commentator on the Origin Beast platform speak once again. Although that planet is extraordinary and protected by domains, it's still possible for a saint to kill a person without destroying the land on a large scale. It's impossible for the natives there to survive if they want to fight against the saints. The famed guests invited by the Origin Beast platform also expressed their opinions. These people were quite famous and could definitely comment on the battle between saints. Everyone, please watch carefully. That young man must die no matter what. Once the saint's blood appears, the victim will surely fall. That's why we must revere him. No matter where, the dignity of saint cannot be violated. Once blasphemed, he will be killed even if he's separated by the 9 heavens and 10 earths. The famed guests began to comment one after another. At the same time, some elders were educating their descendants in the various evolutionary sects and aristocratic families. Remember, no matter what, don't provoke a saint. That kind of existence is unimaginable. You must revere him as long as you don't approach that realm. Once you meet him, you must sincerely bow down. For a moment, the young people in the depths of the starry skies were listening to the teachings of their elders. Their reverence for the saints grew even stronger. Unfortunately, this heaven's chosen one will die without a doubt. He wasn't bad at first, but his tragedy was that he didn't know how terrifying a saint was. He couldn't even look up to them. On the Origin Beast platform, the famed guests were discussing and closing the coffin as they waited for Chu Feng to die. However, everything was different from what people had imagined. The drop of blood above the Eastern Sea was blocked by the domains, but the cause of its destruction was the appearance of Mount Eternal. It was like an arid desert encountering a sweet rain and greedily absorbing it. With a swoosh, the tricolored sacred blood disappeared without a sound and was absorbed by Mount Eternal. One had to know that just now, the firmament had split open and the void was trembling. A terrifying sacred sword formed from blood was about to destroy the world and shatter this place. However, it was taken away and eaten by Mount Eternal. Just now, Chu Feng felt uneasy and his scalp went numb. He knew that he had encountered a crisis of life and death and had already prepared for the worst. However, the pressure suddenly disappeared. In the depths of the starry skies, the Origin Beast platform became silent once again. Whether it was the commentator or the famous guests who were invited to comment, all of them were tongue-tied and speechless before they could express their new opinions. On Earth, Chu Feng rose into the air and stood on top of the multicolored ship, gazing at the outer realms. He had been killed by saints in succession, but they were all neutralized. Immediately, he was full of confidence. So what if he was reverent? He would still be targeted, so he might as well be a bit more unrestrained. As such, he had a very profound expression as he looked disdainfully at the sky and said, "Who can injure me? I'm peerless under the starry skies." Chapter 459. I am peerless under the starry skies. Chu Feng's hair flew up as he looked disdainfully at the outer realm. This scene was transmitted to the depths of the cosmos and spread along the interstellar network. It was directly reflected on the Origin Beast platforms of the major vital planets. At this moment, all the major starry skies were paying attention. Presently, the outer realm was silent and the starry skies were in peace. Who was the last person who said something like that? When was it? It was too ancient and too long ago for people to remember. But the person who said such words today would definitely be remembered. It was destined to spread throughout the starry skies. At this moment, Chu Feng's kidneys were glowing and a pair of energy wings had sprouted from his ribs. He stood in mid-air as the blue sea rose and fell below and the starry skies above were silent. In outer space, the three saints were silent. The 9 sparrows' teeth were aching. He really wanted to swoop down and slap him to death. Meanwhile, the 2 Tao children shut their mouths tightly and didn't utter a single word. They were afraid of incurring the saint's wrath. All the major galaxies and vital planets were in complete silence. There wasn't a single sound, and even the drop of a needle could be heard. That was because everyone was stunned. On the Origin Beast platform, the commentator's mouth was filled with bitterness. His head was swelling and his temples were aching. How was he supposed to explain this? Did this native know what he was saying? The legendary guest's eyes almost popped out as they stared at the screen, speechlessly. They drew in breaths of cold air, because this was the first time they had encountered such a thing. I am peerless under the starry skies. How dare he say such words? One had to know that even heaven illuminators wouldn't dare boast about themselves like this. Whoever dared to say such things would cause the starry skies to tremble and blood to flow. The younger generation will surpass us in time. In the end, one of the legendary guests said this after holding it in for a long time. He really didn't dare mention such a sensitive matter as being peerless under the starry skies again. Yes, this young native is so confident. The commentator came to and agreed. He really wanted to laugh it off and quickly pass this matter over. That was because this involved an old matter in history. It was extremely terrifying and sensitive. The legendary guests came back to their senses and didn't want to comment on this matter. However, what made their faces burn up was that the native was still alive. He hadn't died in the saints' hands as they had predicted. Not long ago, they had repeatedly emphasized that the saints were invincible and should never be offended. They should always maintain a respectful heart. However, after that native cursed the saint, he was still alive and kicking. Most importantly, he was still pretending to be invincible. How thick did this native skin have to be to say something like that? In their opinion, the thickness of the wall was about to break through the sky. At this moment, the ordinary people all had strange expressions on their faces. At first, it was very quiet, but very soon, the Origin Beast platform boiled over. Io, what did I hear? They weren't as apprehensive as the commentator and the other legendary figures. They were separated by the interstellar network. So what was there to be afraid of? The birth of a deity, invincible under the starry sky. What's this brother's name? Chu Feng. I'll remember this name. Heavens above, I've encountered an existence whose arrogance has pierced through the heavens. After so many years, a living being that dares to claim to be invincible under the starry sky has once again jumped out. The Origin Beast platform was in an uproar. It was as if the group of people had been injected with phoenix blood. They were thoroughly excited and incomparably restless. They were simply about to explode. The news spread extremely quickly and caused a commotion on the interstellar network. More and more people rushed over and began to enter the Origin Beast platform after receiving the news. At first, many people didn't know, but now they were urgently informed by the people around them. They quickly connected to the interstellar network and logged onto the Origin Beast platform. Earth, Eastern Sea. Chu Feng stood in midair with a very profound expression. On the multicolored ship, the silver turtle under the table stared at his back. It was so hateful that even the roots of its teeth were itching. An ominous glint appeared in its eyes. What goddamn invincible under the starry sky? It wanted to beat him to death with a single fist. Li Lin was also speechless. This native was too pretentious. If he had the guts, he could fly to outer space and try. A strand of hair from a saint could sever his body and splatter his blood across the vast sky. Shouting about being invincible under the starry sky like this. Wasn't he afraid of being struck by lightning? TSK, who dares contend with me? At this time, Chu Feng took the initiative to challenge. He gazed into the distant starry sky. He really couldn't see the saints in outer space, but that didn't mean he couldn't pretend to stare. At this time, he had the demeanor of an expert and was becoming increasingly profound. In outer space, the three saints were still silent. The Nining Sparrow's expression was as if he were suffering from constipation. This native was extremely arrogant, and if he wanted to investigate further, it would be because of him. This put him in a difficult position, and he really wanted to beat this native to death. Now, the people watching the live broadcast on the Origin Beast platform were becoming increasingly excited. It was as if they had drunk the blood of a true dragon or a holy phoenix. Many people were crying out loudly after seeing the saints being beaten up and someone challenging their authority. More and more people entered the Origin Beast platform, and it was overcrowded. At one point, it almost caused the platform to collapse. Who knew how many people were rushing over from different vital planets in different galaxies? Doubtlessly, the name Chu Feng began to shine on the Origin Beast platform. It smashed into everyone with an earth-shattering momentum and was engraved in everyone's mind. Regardless of whether his reputation was good or bad, at the very least, his name had begun to shake the starry sky. At this time, not to mention the ordinary people, even the major evolutionary sects, evolutionary families, and some holy lands were all restless. For a moment, the sky was filled with commotion. In outer space, Yuan Chenkong said, "I want to destroy this planet." He was a saint known as the 100 Transformations and could refine all living things. Naturally, he could destroy a planet with a flip of his hand, but he also knew that this place was different. Sword Saint Duanmu began to fill the air with primal chaos, causing the outer space to tremble. He slowly shook his head and said, "Unless it's a heaven illuminator. Otherwise, the domains here couldn't be destroyed at all because they were laid down by the Sage Master." However, the Heaven Illuminators had always been apprehensive. They were worried that the Sage Master hadn't died and would return. Moreover, this planet was once ranked 11th in the cosmos. There were survivors who had survived and had always been on the run. In the past, someone wanted to destroy this place, but in the end, they suffered a counterattack. This directly caused their planet to be destroyed and their entire race to be wiped out. Doubtlessly, this was a type of great intimidation. The wandering survivors were, in their eyes, super terrorists. They were exceptionally apprehensive. Of course, such people were becoming fewer and fewer and were almost extinct. However, if the Sage Master were to reappear, it would be terrifying. He would be regarded as the greatest source of terror by some people. He could soar out the galaxies, move the heaven and earth, and destroy many vital planets. No one could afford to pay such a price. The Heaven Illuminators weren't afraid of themselves, but they had to worry about their descendants. I believe the Sage Master is dead. Under transformations, Saint Yuan Chunkong said in a deep voice with incomparable resolution, "We've been waiting for news. The mystery of the Sage Master's life and death is about to reach its final conclusion." It was at this time that the silent Jun Ta finally spoke. His words shocked everyone. Even Sword Saint Duanmu and Yuan Chunkong were moved. There was a lot of information contained within. So much so that Jun Tuo's visit this time might have a deeper meaning. In the past, Jun Tuo was one of the main saints. He had once attacked Earth and slaughtered saints here. Take it. It was at this time that Jun Tuo bestowed an item to the Tao child. He himself was still sitting cross-legged in the stone carriage, drowned in primal chaos and unable to see anything. That was a Buddhist relic. Its brilliance illuminated the outer realms and was simply too resplendent. It was left behind by a golden bodhisattva who had died and was now in Jun Tuo's hands. Doubtlessly, this kind of item was exceptionally precious. Even though Jun Tuo had absorbed 80% of the saint origin within it during his recovery, it was still a priceless holy object. This kind of item made the 9 sparrows' eyes red with envy, but didn't dare say much. Chi. The Tao child tossed it out and shot it toward the eastern sea. He wanted to continue attacking Chu Feng. This kind of saint-level Buddhist relic belonged to other saints. Hence, such an attack wouldn't be tainted by karma. If there was a backlash, it would only come from that golden bodhisattva. Boom! Holy power boiled in the air above the sea. A Buddhist relic blossomed with a myriad of golden lights, as if it was about to deliver all living things from suffering. A pure and holy bodhisattva appeared and pressed down. Chu Feng felt a headache coming on. His whole body tensed up as he felt a world-destroying aura. To others, it was sacred, but to him, it undoubtedly represented death and destruction. Once this golden Dharma image appeared, it possessed the momentum of invincibility. Any golden bodhisattva was peerless. It could flatten demons and sweep through a planet. Now, even though it was damaged, it was still terrifying. The vast and unfathomable domains of the earth had been personally laid down by the Sage Master. The domains had once collapsed and were torn apart by heaven illuminators, but after experiencing the great destruction, they were once again whole. It was also because of this that people became increasingly apprehensive. They suspected that the Sage Master hadn't died and had returned to rearrange it. Rumble. In the sky, the golden Dharma image gradually dimmed. It was obliterated by the incomparable domains and gradually disappeared. It couldn't get close to the multicolored ship in the eastern sea. This was the Sage Master's method. The domains were peerless and had forced the Buddhist relic to reveal itself. In the depths of the starry skies, not to mention the others, even the commentator was swallowing his saliva. The pupils of the legendary guest contracted. The Sage Master. One person couldn't help but sigh. Of course, he quickly shut up because this was a taboo character who couldn't be talked about. As for the people on the Origin Beast platform, they didn't have so many misgivings. At this time, the Origin Beast platform's detector gave Chu Feng a close-up. The image became increasingly clear and captured the scene on the multicolored ship behind him. Many people were petrified at this moment. What did they see? Saint Jun Tuo's descendant, In Hong. Not long ago, people already knew the cause and effect. Someone had posted In Hong's photo on the Origin Beast platform, and now they had found the real person. F***CK. Is that the descendant of ancient Saint Jun Tuo? It's there. Heavens, the saint's descendant In Hong is actually being used as a cushion under a table leg. Am I seeing things? What is he being used as? A stepping stone. This scene clearly captured the current situation of a silver turtle being used as a cushion under a table leg. This shocked all the creatures in the starry skies. They were all dumbfounded. In an instant, these people felt that Chu Feng was somewhat profound. Perhaps this was a legendary Bai Ge, directly raising it up. That was the descendant of ancient Saint Jun Toa being used as a cushion. This was too heaven-defying. Very soon, someone cried out in alarm because they had found Saintess Li Lin. Ah, isn't that the goddess in my heart? Why is she there? Heavens, she's actually wearing maid clothes. Goddamn native Chu Feng, what did you do? The Origin Beast platform was in complete chaos. Next, the three saints outside Earth were also furious. They bombarded indiscriminately in an attempt to kill Chu Feng. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. It was exceptionally terrifying. Chu Feng felt extremely guilty. He felt that he was too close to death and could be consigned to eternal damnation at any moment. In the depths of the starry skies, more and more people began to pay attention to this matter. In particular, some saints had come out of seclusion and were paying close attention to this place. When the terrifying holy light ended and the killing stopped, Yi Qingyu's eyes widened. Chu Feng stood motionless. That was because he had really been intimidated not long ago. His mind was unstable and he was trying hard to calm down. In the end, he made his eyes more profound than before and said, "Being peerless is so lonely." In a split second, the entire starry skies turned silent. Thank you, everyone. If possible, please subscribe to support the Saint Ground. Chapter 460. Everyone in the starry skies was dumbfounded. How should they describe him? How confident and narcissistic was this? Perhaps it was even more shameless. How could he say such words? His face was too thick and could be used as a shield on the battlefield. It could block arrows and sparks would fly upon contact. It was invulnerable. The three saints didn't say a word, but their expressions had completely darkened. This native deserved to be executed. He had offended their might time and time again, but there was one thing he couldn't die. Being invincible is so lonely. He actually began to sing. This made everyone dumbfounded. That line just now was fine, but now he was singing with his hands behind his back. He was incomparably conceited. The starry skies were about to explode. On the Origin Beast platform, a group of people were crying out. Was this native Chu Feng going to defy the heavens? Oh my, I can't take it anymore. This brother is too ruthless. He's going to anger the saints to death. Haha, how interesting. Such a peerless character actually appeared on that remote and desolate planet. How strange. At this time, countless people had logged onto the Origin Beast platform to witness this scene. It was simply too noisy and the broadcasting platform was about to explode. That was because there were too many people from all major galaxies. Countless vital planets could log in, and the interstellar network had covered almost every region. Of course, the remote low-level planets were an exception. Being invincible is so lonely. Chu Feng's expression was focused. He was truly engrossed in the song and couldn't extricate himself. Outside of Earth, the three saints' expressions grew darker and darker. Even though they were saints, they couldn't take it anymore. They had attacked several times, but couldn't kill this native. Now, he was even singing like this. Wasn't this a slap to their faces? The Nining Sparrow felt more and more uncomfortable as he wiped his cold sweat. On the Origin Beast platform, the commentator was also wiping his sweat. This was too difficult for him. How could he comment? A little carelessness, and he would offend the three saints. Being invincible is indeed a type of loneliness. However, I feel that his invincibility isn't in his combat strength, but in his conceit. His words and actions are frivolous and unruly. This is indeed an invincible little brother. The commentator held it in for a long time and finally made a comment. The invited guests looked as uncomfortable as if they were suffering from constipation. What should they say? They had long since predicted that this native would die, but he was becoming more and more lively. Can't you see? He sang and danced on the surface of the sea, becoming more and more cheerful. Cough. This young man is really lively. A legendary guest said while coughing. Another renowned expert commented, "It's good to be young, daring to say anything." This can be considered a type of vigor, but it can also be interpreted as being reckless and ignorant of worldly affairs. It's wrong to insult saints like this. You have to understand that all living things have to revere saints. But who on the Origin Beast platform would listen to his preaching? Presently, it was boiling over. People from different galaxies were discussing a single person, and it had never been as restless as it was today. This native is too valiant. He's really fighting against a saint, and currently has the absolute advantage. Someone teased. In everyone's impression, the saints were inflexible, unfathomable, and invincible. The saints sat high up in the sky and were simply unreachable. They belonged to a different world from them and were rarely seen. Now, there was a native who came from a savage land in the most remote corner of the cosmos. He made a saint suffer a setback, and this sufficiently stirred up the rebellious nature in everyone's hearts. That was why they were all stirred up and exceptionally excited. This also caused the number of people surging into the Origin Beast platform to soar. Moreover, it was still increasing. The lyrics are very artistic, and the singer is also very tasteful. We have to record it and listen when we have nothing to do. As expected, countless people were recording. This kind of scene astonished some evolver sects that were researching sound wave techniques. Even the albums of the outstanding disciples of these sects weren't this popular. Even the saintesses of the top-notch evolver sects that mainly research sound waves and were extremely influential when they released phenomenal works. One had to know that those songs and temperaments could promote the gradual growth of an evolver's spiritual power. Listening to them for a long time would bring great benefits. Now, a random song hummed by a native from a remote planet could almost be mentioned in the same breath as the most popular saintesses. I seriously suspect that after today, being invincible is so lonesome will appear on the spiritual song rankings, someone said with certainty. Of course, the recording has already been completed. Many people chimed in. At this time, the major characters behind the Origin Beast platform were very satisfied. According to statistics, the number of people online on the Origin Beast platform occupied the first place with an overwhelming advantage. They were far ahead of the number of people online on the other competing platforms. Earth, Eastern Sea. Chu Feng was becoming more and more confident. He felt that it would be difficult even for a saint to kill him, so much so that they might not even succeed. That was because he was still alive after such a long time despite courting death. This was enough to prove that even saints weren't omnipotent. It was at this time that he saw a small boat spying on the distant sea surface. In a split second, Chu Feng spread his wings and rushed over. His speed reached its peak as he swooped down and captured this level 9 awakened person. Relatively speaking, this person's evolutionary level was so low that Chu Feng could use his spiritual power to probe into his thoughts without any hindrance. People from Peng Lai. Currently, many people from Peng Lai had been mobilized to search for Chu Feng. That was because he had killed the Chun family's young master, Chun Sheng, Chun Pu, and Chun Feng. They wanted revenge. When they discovered that this region of the sea was turbulent and terrifying, some people came to investigate the situation. At this time, the Chun family of Peng Lai had dispatched a group of powerful troops to search for Chu Feng all over the world. They wanted to eradicate him and not let him live. So much so that some people were looking for people related to him, such as his parents and the great demons of Kunlun. They were going to use some extremely sinister methods. After Chu Feng understood this, he revealed a cold expression. There were some people from Peng Lai who didn't stop until they killed him. Bang! He knocked this person unconscious and tossed him onto the small boat. He felt it beneath him to kill such a small character who hadn't done any evil. Chu Feng returned to the multicolored ship and instructed Saintess Li Lin, "My maid, set sail. We're going to Peng Lai as guests." Li Lin glared at him. She was very conflicted about being called a maid, but in the end, she endured it. She drove the multicolored ship away, riding the wind and breaking the waves. At this moment, the starry skies were shaken. A considerable number of people on the Origin Beast platform were wailing and cursing. They were incomparably hostile toward Chu Feng and were no longer admiring him like before. They wanted nothing more than to eat him alive. What a heartache! My goddess, how did you end up as his maid? I can't believe it. I can't accept it. Someone let out a heart-wrenching howl. Impossible, what I saw isn't real. Everything is fake. How hateful. Native, I'm going to kill you. Return my goddess Li Lin. Doubtlessly, this was someone from the same planet as Li Lin. Seeing Li Lin in such a state, the group beat their chests and stamped their feet. They were incomparably indignant and wanted nothing more than to kill their way over. Earlier, the cameras had captured the silver turtle and Li Lin, but it was all in a hurry. These people were still hoping for a fluke, but now they were close to despair. It had been thoroughly confirmed. The others only felt that Li Lin was beautiful, otherworldly, and her temperament was like a top-notch saintess from a high-ranking planet. Now that it had been confirmed, there was an immediate uproar. Damn, this brother is too evil. He caught a saintess by his side. I'm so jealous and hateful. I also want to run to that planet to hunt. Is she really a saintess from a high-ranking planet? I heard she's a saintess from the most powerful orthodoxy on that planet. This means that she's also the number one of the younger generation in that star domain. How heaven-defying. Even those major characters don't dare to encroach on a goddess-like character of this level. This native, I want to kill him. Let me swap identities with him. Oh God, please fulfill my wish. Contrary to everyone's expectations, there were indeed many people who hated Chu Feng, but there were even more people who were jealous and envious. Some even let out wolf howls. Those who came from the same high-ranking planet as Li Lin were incomparably resentful as they called out on the Origin Beast platform. Everyone, don't you think this native is despicable? He's too shameless. We want to rescue Saintess Li Lin. Who's going with us to kill that native? Some people responded and shouted one after another that they wanted to rescue the goddess from the tiger's mouth. Some people mercilessly said, "Stop making a fuss. By the time you go along the star passage, it'll be a year and a half later. Goddess Li's child will be born by then. What are you going to do? Celebrate the safety of mother and child?" The group of people cried out miserably after hearing these words. At this time, Chu Feng was lying comfortably on the rattan chair. He was pondering that since Peng Lai liked to join in on the fun, he would let them join in and scare them to death. He had no idea that there were countless people gnashing their teeth in the depths of the starry skies. They wanted nothing more than to eat him alive. The large ship finally approached Peng Lai Island, which was shrouded in dense mist. At this time, Chu Feng was lost in thought while holding the communicator. That was because he had further understood the situation. Some descenders had leaked this information, and acquaintances had informed him at the first instance. Chu Feng's expression was odd as he stared at the silver tortoise under the table leg. Everything had actually started because of it. He had already understood that there was an ancient saint in the outer realms called Jun Tuo who had come in a thunderous rage for him. At the same time, he looked toward Li Lin. There was also a sword master Duanmu who had come for her. At this moment, Chu Feng actually had an uncomfortable expression as if he was constipated. After all this trouble, he had attracted the saint's murderous intent. But he also felt that those ancient saints might have deeper intentions and weren't simply here to kill him. Enter the island. Chu Feng didn't hesitate and ordered the Saintess Li Lin to drive the ship into the island. This island could be considered a secret realm hidden in the vast ocean. It only appeared in the main space of Earth after the upheavals. The multicolored ship could fly through the air and enter the island. After arriving here, Chu Feng kicked the silver tortoise under the table leg and said, "What's with that look? Why are you glaring at me? Damn your grandpa." The silver tortoise cursed inwardly. Although it was itching to kill Chu Feng with its tortoise fists, it hadn't glared at him just now. As the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. A tortoise under the eaves had no choice but to lower its head. "I'm not glaring at you." From its point of view, this native was definitely looking for trouble. It had guessed correctly. Chu Feng was using it to challenge Jun Tuo so that the ancient saint would attack again. That was because the sky had been quiet for some time, and he now needed the saint's might to frighten the people on Penglai Island. The large ship entered the island and was immediately discovered. Someone berated it loudly. Chu Feng wasn't vague at all. He gave the silver tortoise a kick and said, "A 1,000-year-old tortoise and a 10,000-year-old tortoise. I could tell at a glance that you're not a good thing. Speak, is there an even older tortoise among your ancestors?" Many people on the Origin Beast platform gasped. The commentator really wanted to say that he had guessed correctly this time, but he didn't dare utter a sound even if he was beaten to death. If he really offended the ancient saint, he would die without a burial ground. Outside of Earth, ancient Saint Jun Tuo's chariot erupted with dazzling radiance. It was practically like a burning sun illuminating the outer realms. Then, lightning flashed and thunder roared. In the blink of an eye, a world-destroying aura descended above Penglai Island. It was terrifying to the extreme and caused many people to tremble. There were even more people who went limp on the ground. And at this moment, Chu Feng had a callous expression on his face. He was like a demonic god as he looked at the people of Penglai in front of him and shouted, "You bunch of slaves, you're treacherous and want to kill your master. Today, the people of the direct bloodline have arrived." He had long since told Li Lin to stop the large ship and get ready to make a spatial jump to escape at any time. Thunder and lightning interweaved in the sky. The saint was furious. Although he hadn't made his move yet, it had already caused the heaven and earth to change drastically. That was completely caused by an ancient saint's emotions. To the people of Penglai, it was too terrifying. That Chu Feng stood on the large ship with his hands behind his back. All kinds of divine scenes appeared above his head, and he was suffused with an irresistible aura. Chu Feng felt that this wasn't enough. He immediately lifted his leg and began to kick the silver tortoise violently. He said in a low voice, "Look at your tortoise appearance. Your ancestor must be a coward. A 1,000-year-old tortoise and a 10,000-year-old tortoise can only live a bit longer." The silver tortoise felt wronged. Why was it being kicked again for no rhyme or reason? It was very sullen and felt that it had been wronged. The Origin Beast platform was in an uproar. "God, I'm afraid you still don't know that the ancestor of that silver tortoise is in the outer realms. He's an ancient saint, and he's staring at you. I really want to know what ancient Saint Jun Tuo is feeling right now." Saint Jun Tuo is absolutely mad with anger. He wants nothing more than to slap that brat to death. This kind of matter can't be tolerated. This Chu Feng is too heaven-defying to dare ridicule a peerless saint like this. The Origin Beast platform was boiling. People were incomparably looking forward to what would happen next. That was because Chu Feng's words were too heart-wrenching. Cursing a 1,000-year-old tortoise and a 10,000-year-old tortoise just so happened to match ancient Saint Jun Tuo's title. The famous guests who had been invited all shut their mouths and didn't dare comment at all. They had never felt that doing a program would be so frightening. If they had known that such a thing would happen, they wouldn't have come even if they were beaten to death. Boom, boom, boom. The world-shaking scene that Chu Feng was looking forward to appeared. The bloody scene of a golden bodhisattva being torn apart appeared and was reflected in the sky. The terrifying scene of a vital planet being destroyed flickered and shook people's hearts. All of this appeared above Chu Feng's head. At this time, he finally stopped kicking the silver tortoise. He put on an extremely callous appearance and strove to display the temperament of a ruthless, demonic god. He looked down on all living things. He shouted at the people of Penglai, "Kneel!" As expected, there were people trembling and shivering on the other side. Chu Feng was like a callous, demonic god as he said, "Do you really think the experts of our bloodline have all disappeared? There are still people here." He pointed at the firmament. The aura around him was terrifying, and all kinds of strange phenomena were becoming increasingly astonishing. Of course, he had already made preparations to escape. Once the saint opened his mouth and exposed him, he would immediately drive the large ship to jump through space. In any case, this ship had this function and was enough to escape from Penglai. It would be wonderful if the people here weren't frightened and were really scared. They would go limp and kneel on the ground. You are a group of delusional slaves who want to deceive your master. How audacious! You consider yourself the orthodox lineage and even want to harm the main bloodline. Are you tired of living? Chu Feng continued to berate. At the same time, he was puzzled. Why hadn't the saint in the firmament exposed him? He hesitated slightly. In order to make the scene even more astonishing and to use the saint's aura to directly suppress the people of Penglai in front of him, he decided to add a little more fuel to the fire. Chu Feng looked at Li Lin and transmitted his voice in a low voice. Sing me how lonely it is to be peerless. Li Lin's beautiful eyes were wide open. He wanted her to sing such a narcissistic song? How was that possible? It was too vulgar. She absolutely wouldn't agree. If you don't sing, I'll immediately publish half of the photo book on the internet. Chu Feng threatened. Li Lin wanted to fight him to the death, but in the end, she still gave in. She began to sing softly and slowly. Her voice was extremely beautiful and had a special charm. How lonely it is to be peerless. There was a period of silence in the starry sky at first, but then there was an explosion. Making the saintess sing this kind of song was one reason, but there was another more important reason. What did they hear? A photo book. Outside of Earth, a certain saint was also furious. He had come precisely for Li Lin. Chapter 461. In the starry skies, the Origin Beast platform was filled with wolf howls. Heavens, the #1 person of the younger generation on a high-ranking planet, the saintess of the strongest orthodoxy, has actually succumbed to the demonic claws of that native. Oh heavens, hurry up and strike that evil creature to death. Let me replace him and make him disappear. The saintess is mine. Oh God, the goddess in my heart has been recorded in a photo album by that bastard. Strike him to death, God Chu Feng, please give me a photo album. Li Lin's voice was gentle and beautiful, and her singing was very sweet. She had actually listened to the native's orders and was singing without accompaniment. This made the group of people on the platform howl like hungry wolves, especially when Chu Feng had mentioned the photo album just now. This made the eyes of the group turn red, and they wanted to slap Chu Feng to death. How could he blaspheme the saintess like this? They were truly jealous and full of hatred. Many people looked as though they had been injected with the blood of a holy phoenix. This pleasant voice resounded throughout the platform. Many people were recording it. It was obvious that even the songs released by the outstanding disciples of the Holy Land of Evolution, who mainly studied sound waves, weren't this popular. Of course, there were also many people who were about to go crazy from grief and indignation. They were shouting that they must slaughter that native and couldn't accept such a cruel outcome. Saintess Li Lin is feeding the devil with her body. I can't bear this. I'll set foot on the star passage and save the goddess. Even though they knew it would take a year and a half to reach Earth, a considerable number of people set out with boundless resentment and anger to slaughter the devil. Outside of Earth, the expression in the eyes of the dark-faced sword Saint Duan Mu had long since changed. His eyes were filled with primal chaos and interweaving lightning. The saint was furious, and the astronomical phenomena were terrifying. He had come for the saintess of his old friend's sect, Li Lin. He had actually seen such a scene where the saintess was being forced to sing how lonely it was to be invincible. Clang! A beam of sword light gushed out and illuminated the solar system. It was simply too resplendent. On Penglai Island on Earth, the group of people had been subdued. The weaker ones were trembling with cramps in their calves and stomachs. They were too frightened. Chu Feng actually had such a great background. Some people felt relieved. No wonder he had risen so quickly. He actually had such a background. Immediately, their scalps went numb and they felt a wave of horror. Penglai considered itself to be the orthodox lineage, but if Chu Feng really returned from the direct bloodline, wouldn't they all be a joke? Right at this moment, the sword light in the sky was dazzling. It pierced down and was incomparably terrifying. It simply wanted to slice apart the past, present, and future, sever the river of time, and obtain eternity. Ahead of them, Many Penglai evolvers were frightened out of their wits. That was true holy light, and it oppressed them to the point of suffocation. Many people directly fell limp to the ground, shivering. The brilliant sword light burned like the sun and then exploded. Then all of the light surged downwards, about to submerge the great rainbow ship. It was world-shaking. At this moment, Chu Feng's hair stood on end. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't nervous. At this moment, he felt as though he had stepped into the underworld and was very close to death. Although he looked cold and had the temperament of a ruthless god or devil, his face was actually numb. He couldn't change his expression under the pressure of that aura, and even his body was stiff. However, in the eyes of the people of Penglai, this kind of attitude was truly one of reverence and reverence. This was the aura of invincibility. Many people believed that he had summoned an immortal saint. I've long since said that the ancestral teachings cannot be disobeyed. We are servants, and everything we have was bestowed by the master back then. Breathing techniques, medicinal fields, secret treasures, and so on. Everything belongs to that bloodline, and they gave it to us for free. In the end, we repaid kindness with enmity and wanted to retaliate. Now, retribution has come. An old man's face was deathly pale, and his voice was trembling. Crack! Boom! Glaring holy light exploded not far above Chu Feng's head. Thunder exploded, and all kinds of dazzling runes appeared. They interweaved crazily and were extremely dazzling. Those were the domain runes of the earth. They collided with the astonishing sword light and created a boundlessly terrifying scene. Chu Feng didn't move at all. He was surrounded by world-destroying lightning, sword light, and runes, but he didn't move at all. Under this kind of scene, he really was like a god or devil. His charm was too similar. In truth, the corner of Chu Feng's mouth twitched. He wanted to curse out loud. It wasn't that he wanted to act cool, but he really couldn't move. Thump! Thump! A large number of people knelt down and prostrated themselves in worship. They were almost scared out of their wits after seeing such a terrifying scene. Many people were kowtowing until their foreheads were bleeding. The effect was surprisingly good. Groups of people knelt down and confessed to Chu Feng. Their foreheads were badly mangled, and tears flowed down their faces. Chu Feng was as cool as ever, like a deity descending to the mortal world. However, he was cursing in his heart. When would he be able to move? He really didn't want to continue acting like this. It was too tiring, and he was also somewhat frightened. That sword light was too terrifying. It had locked onto him, and even though it couldn't touch his body and spirit, the formless momentum still caused his whole body to stiffen. It's so lonely to be peerless. Li Lin was still singing. She wasn't affected because Sword Saint Duanmu had come to save her. At this time, Li Lin's expression was peculiar as she stared at Chu Feng. She really wanted to say that this scoundrel was too good at acting. Even she couldn't see any flaws. He really was like the son of a god or devil. The beautiful song drifted through the air. In addition to the thunder from the 9 heavens, the terrifying cymbals and the sword light interweaved. This area was indescribably demonic, and the atmosphere was evil. Finally, Chu Feng caught his breath. He still couldn't move his body, but he could open his mouth. However, it was also very strenuous. His voice was slightly hoarse as he said, "Sacrificial offering, the most divine and sacred object, give it to me." He was practically speaking through clenched teeth. His voice was hoarse, but it seemed even colder. At this time, even the silver turtle admired him and sighed inwardly. This brat really knew how to act. He was too deep and too similar. Many people from Penglai were rolling and crawling as they quickly moved to find good things. They wanted to go to the treasury to search for sacrificial offerings, and they revered Chu Feng as a deity. They were afraid that the terrifying saint behind Chu Feng would come out and slaughter everyone here. At this time, Duanmu's sword light finally stopped. Because the attack was ineffective, he himself suffered a backlash. The saint's essence blood replaced him and was obliterated in outer space. Chu Feng could finally move. He hurriedly opened his mouth, and told Li Lin to stop singing. He also felt a bit of headache because that sword saint was too terrifying. "What the hell are you laughing at?" He saw the silver turtle casting sidelong glances at him. It had discovered that he was only pretending to be fierce but inwardly cowardly and was secretly mocking him. Chu Feng went up and gave it 2 kicks. If it weren't for the turtle shell, this mixed-blood Starcore turtle would have been trampled to death. The silver turtle wanted to curse out loud. It had really become a punching bag, following which it was used as a cushion under the table leg. "Look at your turtle appearance. You're just like your ancestor, meaty and lacking in drive." Chu Feng wasn't speaking irresponsibly because he had long since provoked Junta. In the end, the old turtle didn't personally take action apart from sending down strange phenomena and getting angry. Outside of Earth, Junta was still sitting cross-legged in the war chariot. He hadn't shown himself all this time, but now a cold voice was transmitted to the 2 saints. "The ones I want to kill are the survivors, the true saints. I don't want to waste essence blood here." He guessed that by targeting Earth like this, some of the survivors might jump out and attack the planet he was on. If that really happened, he would tear apart the starry sky in an instant and kill his way back to eliminate the survivors. Their Starcore turtle lineage didn't have many clansmen. They had long since settled down and were least afraid of revenge. But now, after seeing Chu Feng venting his anger on his descendant and even cursing the old turtle, he was furious. This was intolerable. On the multicolored ship on Penglai Island, Li Lin revealed an odd expression. She looked up at the firmament and was somewhat suspicious about the disappearing sword radiance. "What's the situation?" inquired Chu Feng. Li Lin was quite calm. She wanted to put a certain amount of pressure on Chu Feng and said, "You should let me go. I feel that a senior has come and will take me away." Chu Feng sneered. Earth's domains had recovered, and even saints couldn't enter. "That's my ancestor's bosom friend. I won't give up until he can save me," said Li Lin. Chu Feng laughed and said, "It should be your ancestor's pursuer, right? Don't speak nonsense." Li Lin rebuked, but she was somewhat powerless. From her expression, Chu Feng immediately understood that his guess was more or less the same. He immediately laughed and said, "This saint is too stupid. He pursued me until the end and called it a bosom friend, but he was actually a failure. Stop making up stories." Li Lin immediately retorted. Boom! The Origin Beast platform immediately exploded. They had actually dug up the saint's emotional history. This was too fresh. Oh my, who would have thought that Sword Saint Duanmu had actually pursued Saintly Miao and failed in the end? There's such a dark history. Perhaps it's because the Sword Saint's emotions were thwarted that he opened up the peerless Sword Dao. The Origin Beast platform was in a clamor. The noise was too loud, and people were excited. They were incomparably interested in the Saint's dark history. The commentator's face immediately turned green. This kind of matter was too terrible. As for the special invited guests, they also shrunk their necks. They absolutely wouldn't participate in such matters and didn't comment on a single word. That old fellow Duanmu pursued Fairy Li Miao bitterly back then. He gave her Qilin orchids every day, rain or shine, but in the end he still left in tears. It was at this time that a saint appeared on the Origin Beast platform to expose his shortcomings. Heavens, the Sword Saint has appeared. It really is this saint. He actually logged in with an authenticated account and expressed his opinion. Is he trying to defy the heavens? Only a few people knew that the Sword Saint and the Sword Saint were natural enemies because they had both pursued Saintly Miao when they were young. Now, no one dared to come out and comment carelessly unless they were saints of that level. Li Lin didn't know that her simple words had caused a huge commotion in the starry skies. That was because she had no idea that all the major galaxies were currently watching Chu Feng's live broadcast. One had to know that the Earth was at the edge of the universe and didn't have an interstellar network in the past. How could she have expected that it would be covered now? At this time, Sword Saint Duanmu's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He couldn't help but shout, "Li Lin, what nonsense are you spouting?" At the same time, killing intent surged from Punglai Island. A group of old men crossed over with great weapons in hand, wanting to kill Chu Feng. Little evil creature, you dare swindle our clansmen? You're courting death. Punglai Island was extremely large and was like a continent. Chu Feng and the others were only in the outer region. This kind of momentum could suppress ordinary evolvers, but the old monsters in the depths of the island didn't care. If it weren't for the fact that the area was as large as a continent and the distance was too great, they would have long since charged over after receiving the report. Run! Chu Feng immediately ordered Li Lin. But now, even with the threat of the photo album, Saintess Li Lin didn't have any reaction because she was in a daze. She knew who had come. It was indeed Sword Saint Duanmu himself. Boom! Chu Feng quickly took action himself. He steered the multicolored ship and made a spatial jump. There was nothing to regret because he knew he couldn't swindle offerings and treasures. The people in the depths of the island weren't stupid. How could they be fooled? He was already satisfied with his current achievements. Grandsons of Punglai Island, I'm leaving. Remember, you've all knelt down and kowtowed to me. Don't pretend in front of me in the future. You bunch of servants, your backbones have long since been broken. With a swoosh, the multicolored ship disappeared as it made a spatial jump. The group of people behind was furious and couldn't restrain their anger. This was a disgrace, an extraordinary humiliation. The people on the Origin Beast platform were amused and broke into laughter. As they saw it, Chu Feng was too unconventional. He was constantly challenging the dignity of the saints. They had a strong sense of identification with him as a grassroots native. They all hoped he would offend the saints a few more times. This fellow is really a role model for our generation. He runs after acting. Oh my, this fellow is too shameless. He took advantage of them and then ran. Is he trying to anger the people on that island to death? As expected of someone from our generation. In outer space, the three saints' expressions were unsightly. They discovered that the comments on the Origin Beast platform actually lacked a sense of identification with them. The Sword Saint appeared again and said, "This brat is to my liking. His actions are tyrannical." He directly snatched Fairy Li Miao's successor to be his maid. If I had been as domineering as him back then, I wouldn't have ended up like this. As for Sword Saint Duanmu, there's no need to think too much about that fellow who only knows how to cry. If he was given another chance, he would only wipe away his tears. If Chu Feng comes to the depths of the starry skies one day, I, the Sword Saint, will treat him to a drink. These words were accompanied by wild laughter. This caused many people on the Origin Beast platform to become excited. They hoped he would say more and reveal some juicy news. Sword Saint Duanmu was so angry that his fingers were trembling. Before long, an earth-shattering crisis appeared. That was because the saints were furious and vowed to destroy Chu Feng. The saints had endless methods. Once they paid the price, they would definitely succeed if they wanted to kill someone as long as they didn't wantonly damage the earth. Chu Feng piloted the multicolored ship. At first, he was quite leisurely. Suddenly, he looked up and his pupils constricted. That was because the sky was densely packed with battleships. They crackled like dumplings as they appeared and fell continuously. Strange phenomenon. At first, he suspected that it was another saint's method and that the astronomical phenomenon wasn't real. But soon, he felt his blood run cold. He piloted the multicolored ship and immediately fled. Let's see who dares save you. Who can save you? The ancient Saint Jun Tua spoke with dense killing intent. He hadn't made a move all along, but in the end, he couldn't bear it any longer. His descendant had been beaten up and even called him an old turtle. This caused many people on the Origin Beast platform to laugh wildly. Even the ancient Saint Jun Tua couldn't bear it. There were many battleships in the solar system that had been researching how to safely enter the Earth. Now, they had been summoned by Jun Tua and given the protection of a saint's blood, allowing these battleships to descend. One could see that there was a red light outside of many battleships. They were protected by a layer of secret force. If I, Jun Tua, want to kill someone, there's no one I can't kill, Jun Tua said coldly. Old bastard Jun Ta'a, this grandpa won't die. What can you do to me? Chu Feng challenged. He heard Jun Tuo's cold words transmitted through space. Boom. The next moment, he felt the threat of death. There were battleships glowing and attacking him. Moreover, the experts of the mechanical race appeared. Their bodies were wrapped in a faint red light as they swooped down from the firmament. They were consuming the saint's blood in order to obtain the protection to enter the earth and kill Chu Feng. The saint was paying the price in blood. He had sent the mechanical race down and vowed to kill Chu Feng without giving him a way out. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.